Stories of Futures Past presents 5 stories featuring What is Real? Volume 1. The Old Martians by Rog Phillips. 6 Frightened Men by Robert Silverberg. Dream Town by Henry Slesar. The Highest Mountain by Bryce Walton. Wall of Crystal, Eye of Night by Algis Budrys. The Old Martians by Rog Phillips. Originally published in If Worlds of Science Fiction, March 1952. Narrated by Trussel. The man with the pith helmet had his back toward me. Hunched forward, he was screaming at the girl in the lens of his camera. "Don't just stand there, Dotty! Move! Do something! Back up toward that column with inscriptions on it!" The girl was tall and long-legged, with ideal body proportions, her features and skin colouring a perfect norm blend with no throwback elements. Right now she seemed confused and half frightened as she tried to comply with the directions of the man with the movie camera. She smiled artificially, turned her head to look at the fragment of a wall behind her, reached out with a finger and started tracing the lines of an almost obliterated inscription in its stone surface. The camera stopped whirring. Its owner straightened and grumbled, "That's all." Now the girl was allowed to go back to her worrying. Swiftly she surveyed the crowd, but didn't find the person she was looking for. She started moving toward one of the arches that led deeper into the ruins. I followed her slowly. She passed through the arch, stopped, and turned her head toward the right, her eyes on something out of sight. She'd found him, but she saw me at the same time, and her worry deepened. When she moved back into the crowd, I strolled casually through the archway. There was a vaguely defined passageway, the roof over it gone for 500,000 years, of course, and 20 feet away, oblivious of his surroundings except for what was directly in front of him, was my man. His height and build were somewhat less than the norm, but it was his profile that drew my attention. A remarkable throwback, a throwback of a distinct type. In fact, he might well have served as the model in the type's textbooks labelled British. The resemblance was subtle. Only one trained to differentiate would ever have noticed it. I let my attention take in his whole figure. His elbows had a habit of making fluttery movements when his exploring hands paused so that a strange bird-like impression was given. Also an air of ungainliness in the lines of the lean body, rather than the feline smoothness and grace of the norm blend. It was so in keeping with his features that it served to strengthen the psycho-diagnosis. A throwback to an era 10,000 years in the past, and therefore, as the textbooks say, prone to mental instability. It was no wonder that the girl called Dotty had had the air of being perpetually worried. She appeared now from the far side of the ruin and approached the man. He sensed rather than saw her, and straightened up, every line of him etched with excitement. "Dotty," he said, "I found it! I found the proof! I've been here before, thousands of years ago, when this wasn't a ruins. I remember!" The girl's manner reflected weariness. "Please, Herb, you got to forget all about it. You'll talk too much." His shoulders stiffened. "Don't worry. I won't talk until I have proof to convince even them. Somewhere around here something lies buried, something I will be able to remember. They will dig where the rocks haven't been touched for 5,000 centuries and find what I say is there." Dotty was shaking her head. "No, Herb. If it were on Earth, I might half believe you, but not here on Mars. These people weren't even humanoid." "Neither was I," Herb whispered hoarsely. I sighed regretfully. I'd seen too many cases like this one. I'd grown to dread them. But it was a job, and a man had to eat. The guide began herding the tourists back to the bus. I mingled with the crowd, and when Dotty and Herb climbed aboard, I managed to stick close to them. "Where'd you two go to?" the man in the pith helmet called from where he was sitting. "Stick close to me. I put a new roll in the camera. At the next place, I want to get some shots of both of you together." "All right, George," Dotty said obediently. She and Herb were forced to find separate seats. They would do no talking, so I faced around and studied the three alternately. The man in the pith helmet, George, was a normal blend, totally unconcerned about his reactions on others so long as he could pursue his hobby. The bus detoured a roped-off area in the center of the ancient city, the part considered too dangerous because of cave-in possibilities, and made its way out to the northern edge of ruins, to the part that resembled the ancient cemeteries on Earth. The only major difference was that there were no remains under the evenly spaced stones. There was some doubt that it had been a cemetery, but the guide announced it as one, and that announcement, as the bus came to a stop, had a pronounced effect on Herb. He began his fluttery elbow movements again, and looked around at Dotty with a triumphant smile. I moved up quickly to keep him in earshot. He protested when George insisted on taking camera shots, then gave in and cooperated in order to get it over with. Finally George snapped his camera shut. Herb mumbled something to Dotty that I didn't catch, and started down one of the lanes between rows of stones as though headed for a definite goal. I couldn't very well follow after they left the main group. It would have been obvious. Instead, I veered off to one side, gambling that when they reached their destination, I would be able to read their lips. I got well away from stragglers and took out my mirroscope, pointing it off in the distance and swinging the objective lens around until it centered on them. I was lucky. They were facing in my direction. "It isn't a cemetery," Herb was saying with emphatic motions of his hands. "It was a parking area, and this stone was where I parked my air sled. I can remember it as though it were yesterday." I had to admire the man's subconscious. It was a remarkably shrewd guess. The experts wouldn't play along with it, but they would probably never be able to prove him wrong on that count. But Dotty was arguing with him. "How can you prove it was a parking area?" Her eyes roamed over the large field with its regularly spaced stones. "It certainly looks impractical for a parking lot." "Just the same, that's what it was. I wish I had a shovel here. I seem to remember burying something near my stone. If I could find that, it would prove I really remember." "Why don't you forget it?" Dotty pleaded. "After all, even if it were true, what does it matter now?" "It matters to me. Ever since we arrived here, I've seen familiar things, too familiar to be coincidence. I never felt this way before. I always considered reincarnation as ancient superstitious belief, just like everyone else. But not any more. I know. I lived here when all this was new." "But can't you just be satisfied to feel that you did, and let it go at that?" Dotty asked. "I'm afraid of what they would do to you if they found out what you're thinking." "Ha!" Herb snorted. "I have a feeling that before we leave Mars I'll be able to prove it to them. Somewhere in this city is something that only I know exists, is hidden under stones that haven't been disturbed since man first set foot on the planet. It isn't entirely clear yet, but it will come. It will come. Then I'll make them listen. They'll dig, and they'll find what I say is there. You wait and see." "They'll lock you up, darling," Dotty said. "They won't believe you." The guide was calling everyone back to the bus. I watched Herb scowl fiercely at the stone marker that he believed to have been his, open his mouth to say something, then turn away so that his lips were out of sight. Regretfully, I put the mirroscope away and went back to the bus. I knew where we were going next, and I was uneasy about it. Herb and Dotty managed to sit together, and I got a place right behind them where I could eavesdrop, but they sat in silence. The bus had left the ancient city behind to head out over the desert toward one of the few structures on Mars which had withstood the ravages of time without crumbling. An immense dome of solid concrete reinforced with pure copper rods harder than steel. The Martians had known what Earth civilization didn't learn until around the year 3000. That copper can't be tempered, but pure copper becomes tempered of itself in 1,000 years. That immense dome was a honeycomb of passageways and rooms, some of which were not open to tourists. It would be a natural for Herb. The bus stopped. The people were piling out and staring curiously at the smooth surface of the dome, especially at places where the reinforcement rods were protruding and glittering like tarnished gold. 2 of the permanent guards had come out to take charge of the tour. I caught the eye of one of them and nodded toward Herb. The guard caught my meaning, edged over to his partner, and soon both men were warned that Herb was to be closely watched. I felt better, knowing that a couple of others knew about him. Maybe it would have been smarter to have taken him in custody right then, but it would have meant a scene. The procedure of the tour was for the guide to do all the talking, leading the procession through the roped-off parts of the dome, while the 2 guards followed along behind to make sure no stragglers got left. I let 3 or 4 people move in front of me so Herb wouldn't get suspicious. Dotty was sticking close to him, plainly worried, and he was more excited than he had been at any of the other spots. He fairly quivered, his eyes caressing the walls with a fevered look. Dotty didn't miss his increased agitation, especially after he whispered in her ear a couple of times. The guide took the usual path, straight into the dome, pausing at 6 small rooms with carved walls, to arrive at a bank of elevators installed in the exact center, then straight up to the roof and the observation platform from which miles and miles of desert and ruins could be seen. Then back down to the 2nd level, a zigzag course through other rooms, and finally down a flight of steps to where the tour started. I kept my eyes on the back of Herb's head. You can tell a lot by doing that. At first his head turned this way and that, indicating he was full of curiosity. I was waiting for that telltale sudden tensing, with the head directed at some spot that would tell of a sudden memory stirring in the man's mind. I almost missed it when it came, because it was between 2 passages. A blank wall. The briefest pause, then Herb was going on again, as though nothing had happened. But now his head had stopped its curiosity-motivated pivotings. It was the head of a man who was no longer curious, who had made up his mind about something. I didn't like it. And when the group emerged into open air once more, without Herb having tried anything, I knew as certainly as I had ever known anything that he intended coming back here, and soon. In the comfort station, before boarding the bus, I scrawled a hasty note to the guards to investigate the spots halfway between passageways 14 and 15 on the first level, and I slipped it to one of them as I passed him to get on the bus. We visited 4 other spots on the tour. When Herb showed no real interest in them, it only clinched what I was already sure of, that he planned on returning. At the Ancient City Hotel, once again, I gave the high sign, and shortly Herb and Dotty were being watched by capable men, leaving me free to go to my room. Once there, I called to the dome. They were just getting the X-rays set up in place to explore that wall, and promised to call me as soon as they were finished. Next, I called CI and made my report. I was still making it when the operator broke in. "Steve Merritt wants to talk to you," she said crisply. "Make the circuit 3-way, I said. Steve's voice came in. "I had to get to you, Joe. This guy Herb and his wife just left the hotel." "CI's listening too," I said. "Did they say anything that would point to where they're going?" "To the cemetery first. He swiped a couple of knives and forks when they finished eating their dinner, maybe for weapons." "I doubt that," I said, "but I think it's time to pick him up. He's got to be committed." "Wait a minute," CI said. "Joe, you catch up with them. Join them and play along. Tell this guy Herb you overheard him and guessed what was going on. Gain his confidence if you can." "That's pretty dangerous," I replied. "That guy's—" "It's orders," CI said. "Steve, you lay the net so that whatever happens, we can contain it." That was that. Orders. But I still didn't like it. I went to the desk and took out my compact paralysis tube. Then, reluctantly, I put it back. I would have to play the part. The paralysis tube would give me away as an agent. It would have to be up to Steve and the others to contain the threat. Down in the lobby, I saw Steve waiting impatiently. He was uneasy, too. "What's come over, CI? They're toying with dynamite on this." "I think I know what they want. They want to let him go far enough so we can see more of the nature of the danger. And I hope nobody gets killed. They should have spotted this Herb guy and not let him come here at all. I suspect they did spot him, and let him come to conduct another of their damned experiments. They don't want to leave well enough alone." We were outside now. No one was around. The sun was just beginning to set, and the instant it disappeared, the night would be pitch black, even if one of the moons was out. "We'll be watching on the standard CI band," Steve assured me. "They're at the temple right now, waiting for it to get dark." He grinned. "Good luck." There was a mixture of genuineness, half mockery, and worry in his voice. At the temple ruins, I found them easily enough, and took the simplest course. I walked right up to them. "Hello," I said. "I thought I'd find you here. I want to go along with you. I'm interested." "What do you mean?" Herb was hostile and suspicious. "You remember me? I was on the tour this afternoon. I accidentally overheard you. It would be something if reincarnation could be proven." "Do you believe in reincarnation?" I frowned, as though being cautious. "I don't know." Then I put a disarming grin on my lips. "Since believing in it is legally classified as insanity, for the records, no." It was a nice statement. It could imply that I did, and Herb took that implication. He accepted me. Dotty was different. "How do you know he isn't an agent?" she asked Herb uneasily. "If I am, the fat's in the fire," I told her. "But wouldn't I be locking him up?" This quieted, but didn't satisfy her. "Anyway," I said, If you can dig up something that you remember burying, an extra witness won't do any harm. That's what you are after, isn't it? Proof that will end the last bit of doubt?" "That's right," Herb said, "and you can help me dig." "Okay then," I said, and it was settled. We introduced ourselves, then lapsed into silence while we waited for the sun to set. It wasn't long. The place looked more like a cemetery than ever in the eerie glow of black-light pencils as we made our way along a row of stone markers. Herb strode purposefully. Dotty stuck close to him, still a little suspicious of me. I trailed half a step behind. Finally Herb stopped beside one of the markers. "This is it," he said softly. I blinked at the marker, then at Herb. It wasn't the one he had singled out in the afternoon. Was he mixed up? If he wasn't, he was a good actor. He took out one of the dinner knives and squatted down and started to probe the soil, loosening it so that it could be scraped out by hand. I watched him dig. Part of the time I helped him. We found nothing. After a reasonable amount of this, Herb stood up with a resigned sigh. "Guess I was wrong," he said. "Poor Herbie," Dotty said. "Yeah, poor Herbie," Herb said with every appearance of tiredness and defeat. "But that's that. Sorry to have gotten you all excited about nothing, Joe. Guess it was too much to expect anything." He turned to Dotty. "As long as we're out here, let's take a walk by ourselves, huh?" That was as obvious a cue as I had ever been handed. Neat. I was confronted with the alternatives of scramming or calling him a liar. "Guess I might as well go back to the hotel," I said cheerfully. "See you in the morning." I headed back the way we had come until I was sure they couldn't hear me or see me with their black light pencils. Then, ducking down next to a marker, I waited. After a couple of minutes I heard cautious footsteps. "It's me, Joe. Steve." "Good," I grunted. "What are they doing now? They gave me the brush off." "I got the play," Steve said. "Slick. Should we close in now, or wait?" "I think I'll play my part a little further. Don't want CI to think we're timid." "Okay," Steve said. "The next funeral we attend may be our own." "Yeah," I said. "It might." I moved into the darkness, not using my black-light pencil, but keeping my sensitized glasses on so I could see Herb's if I got close enough. I reached the spot where we had done the digging. I hesitated, then kept on toward the spot where Herb and Dotty had been so engrossed that afternoon. In my mind's eye, I knew exactly where it was. My hands explored ahead of me, searching out each stone marker along my path, clinging to it as I passed it, and slipping off as I went on to the next. They were my only contact with reality in this total blackness. I was thinking, too. I was thinking of what Herb had said about this being a parking area for air sleds back before the earliest known records of man on Earth when this city was alive. He was probably right about it at that. Analysis had shown the presence of copper and aluminium in the top surface of some of the markers that could only be accounted for by some metallic object setting atop each one long ago, and remaining so that molecular and atomic creep could set in, carrying such atoms deep into the surface crystals of the stone. And I was wondering what it was he hoped to dig up. If it were some sort of weapon, it probably wouldn't work after all this time. It couldn't. Or could it? A few things had been pieced together about the ancient Martian civilization. Not much, but enough to be sure that they knew a few things we had never discovered. They had been masters at creating machines with no moving parts. The electronic devices we had found had proven they knew far more about VHF than we did. I could see what CI was aiming at now. We might not even recognize what Herb was searching for. It would be better to let him find it and get it from him before he could use it, if it was a weapon. And it probably was a weapon. I was pretty sure his main objective was hidden in the wall in the dome, and that this thing in the cemetery was something that would help him get to that objective. My thoughts came back to my surroundings. I was less than a dozen feet from where Herb and Dotty should be. I stopped. There was no trace of black light. I held my breath and listened, and I heard the faint scraping of the knife against stone. I wished fervently that I had a standard CI infrascope so that I could see. Steve probably knew more of what was going on than I did. I had counted on watching Herb by his own blacklight pencil, and he was working in darkness. Carefully I stole forward, inch by slow inch, my ears tuned for the faintest significant sound, such as a grunt of satisfaction that would tell of finding what he was digging for. And a million thoughts taunted me, thoughts about the latest discoveries in disintegration frequencies, thoughts about how little we knew of that ancient Martian civilization. But also I was figuring what Herb would do. He would find the object he was digging for. Unwittingly, he would grunt his triumph. Dotty might forget his strict warnings to be quiet and say something. Regardless of that, he would stand up slowly, fondling what he had found, remembering what it was and how it worked. There would be a few seconds before it would become a weapon in his hands, seconds that I had to make the most use of and be ready for. It was a triumphant grunt I had known would come. Sudden panic made me cast aside whatever vague plan of action I had had. I turned on my pencil, bathing the two in its black light. At the same time I said, "I thought it was a scheme to get rid of me." It was the element of surprise that saved me. A still picture of the scene the black light disclosed etched itself into my mind. There was an object in Herb's hand, a strange, meaningless object, dirty, yet with definite form. It was cradled in his hand like a weapon. It was pointed almost at me. I dropped my pencil and went in low, diving for his legs. I felt the air crackle where I had just stood. As my arms encircled his legs, I heard thunder exploding nearby. Training has its advantages. The moment I felt contact with Herb, that training took over. I jerked and rolled in a movement calculated to throw him to the ground face down, the motion ending in a backbreaker hold. But only a part of my mind was concerned with that. The other part was frozen with horror. Approximately a half-acre of the cemetery was glowing. I saw Steve in the center of it, with Herb's weapon pointing his way. The very inertia of matter held Steve together for that brief instant. Then he was falling apart, melting and evaporating at the same time, just like the stone markers and the ground around him. I had the thing away from him suddenly, and I wondered what to do next. Running footsteps gave me the answer. It was other CI agents closing in. Seconds later they had Herb under control. Dotty was wringing her hands and crying. I was holding the thing, afraid to let go of it, and afraid to keep on holding it. But as the seconds passed without it exploding into destructive action again, I began to let myself think I might live a while longer. The area of destruction was molten now. Its heat was like that of an open blast furnace. We skirted it and headed toward the road, lights in the distance telling us that cars were on the way to get us. I saw Dotty stumble. I took her arm. She looked up at me, recognized me in the light from the glowing pool of bubbling lava, and tried to pull away. "Take it easy," I said gruffly. "I'm your friend, maybe the only friend you've got here." Her look told me she didn't believe me, but she didn't pull away any more. We walked along, and after a moment she seemed to struggle up out of her mental paralysis. "Herb was right," she said in a low, wondering tone. "He really did remember." "It was plain coincidence," I said sharply, "and don't ever let yourself think differently. He's insane. It's a recognized form of insanity. He'll be sent to a good mental hospital, and in a year or two he'll come out good as new." "Coincidence?" she echoed. Then she laughed. It was mirth that drifted quickly into hysterical hopelessness. I dug my fingers into her flesh until the pain brought her to her senses. "Coincidence," I said. "Nothing more. I've seen 17 cases just like his. How else did I spot him? I recognized the type. None of the others found what they rationalized themselves into thinking they remembered from the time they were Martians. Eventually, one of them would stumble onto something. That's coincidence, not incarnated memory." She turned her head and blinked at me. I nodded grimly. "I'm an agent," I said. "I go out on the tours for one purpose only, to spot psychos and make sure they don't get out of control. You'd be surprised how many there are. Some of them, like your husband, probably show no sign of instability until they get here. They look around at the evidence of a civilization that existed before Homo sapiens had evolved on the earth, and it throws them. If you want to understand more about it, read the medical books. They get irrational pre-memories. They look at something, and the idea of familiarity associates with a new impression. They look around a corner and see something, and build up the conviction that they had consciously known what was there before they looked around the corner." I felt that I was making headway with her. I wanted to. I had to. You say there were others, and they didn't find anything?" she said. She was groping for something logical to grasp. I had to give her something. "That's right," I said, "and the law of averages said that someday someone would uncover something that's been missed." She was nodding slowly now, accepting what I was saying. It was authoritative. She would find confirmation in authoritative books. If she wanted to pursue the subject, she would find plenty of evidence, real evidence, to support it. It is a common form of insanity. It was important that she believed that. We reached the road. I had been prepared. There was a car to take her back to the hotel, a station wagon for Herb, who was now very submissive and somewhat dazed, and a third car for me and my precious cargo. 10 minutes later, I was in the science building basement, laying the thing on a wooden table, very gently. It seemed solid, each integral part of its form being of a different metal. None of the men watching me lay it down discounted the danger it contained. They knew too much about how shape and dimension can affect the electronic properties of metal. They knew the thing probably didn't contain an erg of power of its own, but probably triggered and directed the release of cosmic energies as yet unknown to them. They stared at it. One of them reached out to touch it, then slowly drew his finger back. I could see the decision crystallizing in their minds behind the serious eyes. This thing would go with the other strange and incomprehensible machines locked in vaults in a concrete building far out on the Martian desert, away from the tourist trails of this dead planet. It would remain there until the day when human science advanced far enough to understand it. "What about the wall in the dome?" I asked. "They roped it off. They're afraid of it." "Did you convince his wife he's insane?" one of the science staff asked. I nodded. I used the same old line, told her there were dozens like him, and the law of averages made it certain that at least one of them would find something. He nodded, grinned without humor. How we love to lie. I turned away. There was a bitter taste in my mouth from all the lies I'd told. All the bilge. But I knew the truth, too. I was as sure of that as I was of anything. It wasn't insanity, of course, and it wasn't reincarnation. It seemed to be, because the mind has a habit of possessing for its very own anything that enters it. The truth of the matter was that somehow, in some incomprehensible way, the Martians were still with us. They hated us, and they knew how to use our weak ones. The Old Martians, and their science. I took a last look at the weapon lying on the table, then left the room and climbed the stairs to the first floor. I walked down the silent, empty hall to the exit and out into the night. I let my eyes roam the blackness of the lifeless Martian desert. With an effort, I pulled them away and fixed them on the warmth, the human warmth, beckoning from the hotel. I started walking toward that bit of comfort, and as I walked, the eternal question that haunted all of us in CI hovered in the background of my thoughts. Would we be able to contain the Martians until we understood the terrible machines they had left as a deadly heritage? Tonight we almost hadn't. I thought of Steve. The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. 6 Frightened Men by Robert Silverberg, writing as Randall Garrett. Originally published in Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, June 1957. Narrated by Tom Trussel. You put your life on the line when you join the exploratory wing of the Space Corps. They tell you that when you sign up. The way they told it to me, it went like this. You'll be out there on alien worlds where no human being has ever set foot. Worlds which may or may not have been inhabited by hostile alien creatures. You take your life in your hands every time you make a planetfall out there. Still interested? That's old stuff, I said. You don't think I'd join up if it was an old ladies' tea party, do you? Which was how I happened to be crouching behind a fantastically sculptured spiraling rock out on the yellow wind-blasted desert of Pollux 5, huddling there with a fierce sweep of sand against my faceplate, looking at the monster that barred my path. The thing was at least 60 feet tall, and all eyes and mouth. The mouth yawned, showing yellow daggers a foot long. As for the eyes, well, they burned with the cold luminosity of an intelligent and inimical being. I didn't know what the thing was. 1 minute I'd been examining an interesting rock formation. The second later I was hiding behind it, watching the ravening thing that had appeared out of nowhere. Other members of the expedition were sprawled here and there on the desert too. I could see Max Feld, A paleontologist, curled in a tight, plump little ball under an outcropping of weathered limestone. And there was Roy Lawrence, the biochemist, flat on his stomach, peering at the thing incredulously. Back behind me were three others: Don Forster, Leo Mickens, Clyde Hammer. That made 6. The 2 remaining members of the team, medic Howard Graves and anthropologist Lyman Donaldson, were back at the ship. We always left a shift of 2 back there in case of trouble. And trouble had sure struck now. I saw Lawrence swivel in the sand and stare goggle-eyed at me. His lips moved, and over my helmet radio came, "What the hell is it, Phil? Where'd it come from?" I'm a morphologist. I'm supposed to know things like that. But I could only shrug and say, "A thing like that could only come from the pits of hell. I've never seen anything like it before." I hadn't. We had been fine-combing the broad windswept plain in front of the ship, looking for archaeological remains. The planet was uninhabited, or so we thought after running a quick check. But Max Feld had discovered relics of a dead race, an exciting find, and we had all fanned out to help him in his search for more. We had been heading toward a flat mountain wall that rose abruptly from the desert about a mile from the ship when, from nowhere, the creature appeared, towering above the desert like a dinosaur dropped from the skies. But no dinosaur ever looked like this one. 60 feet high, its skin a loathsome grey-green, quivering jelly with thick, hairy cilia projecting, its vat-like mouth gaping toothily, its cold, hard eyes flicking back and forth, searching for us as we flattened ourselves out of sight. It was an utterly ghastly being. Evolution had gone wild on this planet, and we were cut off from the ship, hemmed between the mountain wall and the creature. "What are we going to do?" Clyde Hammer whispered. "He's going to smell us out pretty soon." As he spoke, the monster began to move, flowing, it seemed, like some vast protozoan. "I'm going to blast it," I said, as it oozed closer to us. Cautiously, I lifted my Webley from its shoulder holster, turned the beam to full, began to squeeze the firing stud. A bright, white-hot beam of force leaped from the nozzle and speared the creature's eye. It howled, seemed to leap in the air, thrashed around, and changed. It became a boiling mass of amorphous protoplasm, writhing and billowing on the sand. I fired again into the mass, again and again, and the alien creature continued to shift its form. I was cold with horror, but I kept up the firing. My bolts seemed to be absorbed into the fluid mass without effect, but at least I had halted the oozing advance. It reached one final hideous stage, a giant mouth, opening before us like the gate of hell. A mouth, nothing more. It yawned in front of us, then advanced. I felt noxious vapors shoot out, bathing my thermosuit, and I saw a gargling larynx feet across. I fired again and again into the monster's throat. My companions were firing too. We seemed to have halted the thing's advance. It paused some 20 feet from us, a wall of mouth. Then it disappeared. It blinked out of sight the way it had come, instantaneously. For a moment I didn't realize what had happened, and fired 3 useless charges into the space where the monster had been. "It's gone!" Hamner exclaimed. My hands were trembling. Me, who had stood up to Venusian mudworms without a whimper, who had fought the giant fleas of Rigel 9. I was shaking all over. Sweat was running down my entire body, and the wiper on my faceplate was going crazy trying to blot my forehead. Then I heard dull groans coming from up ahead. One final grunt, then silence. They had been coming from Max Feld. Looking around cautiously, I rose to my feet. There was no sign of the creature. I ran to where Max lay. The plump paleontologist was sprawled flat in the sand, face down. I bent, yanked him over, peered in his face mark. His eyes were open, staring, and lifeless. It wasn't till we got back to the ship that we could open his spacesuit and confirm what I thought I saw on his face. Doc Graves pronounced it finally. "He's dead. Heart attack. What the devil did you see out there anyway?" Quickly I described it. When I finished, the medic shivered. "Lord, no wonder Max had an attack. What a nightmare." Donaldson, the anthropologist, appeared from somewhere in the back of the ship. Seeing Max's body, he said, "What happened?" "We were attacked on the desert. Max was the only casualty. The thing didn't touch us. It just stood there and changed shape. Max must have died of fright." Donaldson scowled. He was a wry, taciturn individual, with a coldness about him that I didn't like. I could pretty much guess what he would say. No expression of grief or anything like that. "It's going to look bad for you, Doc, when it's discovered we had a man with a weak heart in the crew." The medic stiffened. "I checked Max's heart before we left. It was as good as anyone's. But the shock of seeing that thing—" "Yeah," Don Forster said angrily. "You'd have been shivering in your boots too if that thing had popped out of nowhere right over your left shoulder." "Keep your remarks to yourself, Forster. I signed on for the exploratory team with the same understanding any of you did, that we were going into alien, uncharted worlds, and we could expect to meet up with anything. Anything at all. Fright's a mere emotional reaction. Adults, as you supposedly are, should be able to control it." I felt like hitting him, but I restrained myself. That ordeal out on the desert had left me drained, nerves raw and shaken. I shrugged and looked away. "Well," Hamner said, "what do we do? Go home?" It was said half as a joke, but I saw from the look on young Leo Mickens's face that he was perfectly willing to take the suggestion seriously and get off Pollux 5 as fast as he could. To forestall any trouble, I said, "It's a tempting idea, but I don't think it would look good on our records." "You're right," Hamner agreed. We stay until we know what that thing is, where it came from, and how we can lick it." We stayed. We spent the rest of that day aboard ship, having called off the day's explorations in memory of Max. The bright orb of Pollux set about 2000 ship time, and the sky was filled with a glorious sight, a horde of moons whirling above. The moons of Pollux 5 were incredible. There were 100 of them, ranging in size from a hunk of rock the size of Mars's Deimos to one massive high-albedo satellite almost 1,000 miles in diameter. They marched across the sky in stately order, filling the Polluxian night with brightness. Only we didn't feel much sense of wonder. We buried Max in a crude grave, laid him to rest under the light of 100 moons, and then withdrew to the ship to consider our problem. "Where did it come from?" Doc Graves asked. "Nowhere," I said. "Just nowhere. One second it wasn't there, next second it was. It vanished the same way." "How could that be?" Donaldson asked. "Matter doesn't work that way. It's flatly impossible." Holding myself in check, I said, "Maybe so, Donaldson, but the thing was there." "How do you know?" the anthropologist persisted, sneering a little. "You're sure it wasn't a mass illusion of some kind?" "Damn you!" Forster shouted. "You weren't there! We were! And we saw it! Max saw it! Ask Max if it was there!" Evenly, Donaldson said, "On the basis of your description, I'm convinced it must have been an illusion. I'm willing to go out there and have a look first thing in the morning, either alone or with any of you, if you can work up the courage. Fair enough?" "Fair enough," I said. "I'll go with you." The next morning we left the ship, clad in thermosuits, armed to the teeth. At least I was. I carried a sub-force gun and a neural disruptor. Donaldson scornfully packed only the prescribed blaster. We crossed the flat plain together without speaking. I led the way, looking back nervously every few paces, but there was nothing behind me but Donaldson. We made a complete reconnaissance of the area, picked up a few interesting outlying fossils. Donaldson thought they might be relics of the dead race of Pollux 5, and reached the bare face of the mountain without any difficulties. "Well," Donaldson asked sneeringly, "where's your monster this time? He afraid of me?" "So it didn't show up," I snapped. "That doesn't prove anything. For all we know, it might jump us on the way back to the ship." "So it might, but I doubt it. For one thing, I've been checking footprints in the sand. I've counted 6 tracks, 1 each for you, Feld, Hamner, Lawrence, Forster, and Mickens. Unfortunately, that doesn't leave any for your monster. There's no sign of him anywhere." I was a little startled by that. I glanced around. "You're right," I admitted, frowning. Licking dry lips, I said, "There ought to be some trace, unless the wind's covered it." "The wind hasn't fully covered the traces of U6 yet," Donaldson pointed out with obstinate logic. "Why should it obliterate only those of your nemesis?" I scowled, but said nothing. Donaldson was right again, but I still found it hard to convince myself that what we had seen was only an illusion. On the way back to the ship, I formulated all sorts of theories to explain the creature. It was a monster out of subspace, generated by etheric force. It was a radiation creature without tangible physical body. It was... I had 6 conjectures, each as unlikely as the next. But we returned to the ship safely, without any trouble whatever. I was sure of one thing. The creature was real, no matter what hell void had spawned it. When we returned, I saw the tense faces of the men in the ship ease. "All right," Donaldson said. "We've both been out there and come back. I say we ought to investigate this place fully. There's been a high-level civilization here at one time, and—" "Suppose it's the monster that killed off that civilization," Forster suggested. "Then it's our duty to investigate it," I had to say, "even at the cost of our lives." Here I agreed with Donaldson. Monster or no, it was our job to fathom the secret of this dead world. We agreed to explore in twos, rather than risk the customary complement of all 6 at once. 2 men would go out, 5 remain within, 3 of them spacesuited and ready to leave the ship to answer any emergency call. Mickens and Forster drew the first assignment. They suited up and left. Tensely, we proceeded about our shipside duties, cataloguing information from the previous stops, performing routine tasks, busying ourselves desperately in unimportant work to take our minds off the men who were out on that desert together. An hour later, Forster returned, alone. His face was pale, his eyes bulging, and almost before he stepped from the airlock we knew what must have happened. "Where's Mickens?" I asked, breaking the terrible hush in the cabin. "Dead," he said hollowly. We got to the mountain and... God, it was awful." He sank down in an acceleration cradle and started to sob. Doc Graves fumbled at his belt, drew out a neurotab, forced it between the boy's quivering lips. He calmed. Colour returned to his face. "Tell us about it," Hamner urged gently. "We reached the back end of the plain, and Leo suggested we try the mountain. He thought he saw a sort of cave somewhere back in there and wanted to have a look. We had to go over that sharp rock shelf to get in there. So we started to scale the cliff. We were about 100 feet up and going along a path maybe 4 feet wide when... He shuddered. then forced himself to go on. "The monster appeared. It popped out of nowhere right in front of Leo. He was taken by surprise and toppled over the edge. I managed to hang on." "Were you attacked?" I asked. "No, it vanished right after Leo fell off. I went down to look at him. His face mask had broken. I left him there." I glanced around at the tight-jawed, hard faces of my crewmates. No one said a word, but we all knew the job that faced us now. We couldn't leave Pollux 5 until we discovered the nature of the beast that menaced us, even if it cost us our lives. We couldn't go back to Earth and send some other guys in to do the job. That wasn't the way the exploratory wing operated. We had a tradition to uphold. We drew lots, and Hamner and Donaldson went out there to recover Mickens's body. They encountered no hazards and brought young Mickens's shattered body back. We buried it next to Max's. The monster had taken a toll of 2 already, without actually touching either. It was almost like some evil plan, unfolding to wipe us out one by one. I didn't like it, but I didn't have anything too concrete to base it on, not till the 5th day. I was teamed with Donaldson again, and I felt strangely confident about our safety. So far, the monster had yet to materialize any time Donaldson was out on the plain. That fact had been in the back of my mind for quite a while. It was the only clue I had. We prowled over the plain, which by now had been pretty well fine-toothed, and then I suggested we try the cave where Mickens had met his fate. "I don't like the idea," Donaldson said, eyeing the narrow shelf of rock we would have to walk across. "You remember what happened to Mickens, and—" I laughed harshly. "Don't tell me you're beginning to believe in this monster of ours." "Of course not. Mickens simply had an attack of vertigo and toppled off. Forster's active imagination supplied the monster. But that shelf looks treacherous. I'd just as soon not go up there." "You're not talking like an exploratory wingman, Donaldson. But it's okay with me if you want to wait down here. That cave might be a gold mine of artifacts. We ought to at least to have a look." His hard face dropped within his mask. "No, I couldn't let it go alone." "You win," he said. "Let's try the cave." We began the climb, and it was, I saw, a deadly road. It narrowed dizzyingly, and while the drop was only 100 feet, which a man could survive if he landed right, spacesuits weren't made to take falls of that sort, and without a suit, a man was instantly dead on this methane-ammonia atmosphere world. We were about 10 feet out on the ledge, I in the lead and Donaldson behind me, when I heard him gasp, "Great God, there it is!" I felt him lurch against me in sudden terror, nearly heaving me into the abyss, but somehow I steadied myself, dropped to my knees, hung on, turned. He had avoided a fall too, but I saw no monster. "Where is it?" I asked. "It came out of the air, right next to me, just popped out of the void and vanished again. I saw it, though." His voice was hoarse. "I apologize for everything I've said. The thing is real. If it weren't for your sure footing, we'd both have gone the way Mickens did." He seemed almost hysterical. There was no sign of the monster, but I wasn't going to take any chances out on this ribbon of rock with a hysterical man. "Let's go back," I said. "We'll try to get to the cave some other time." "All right," Donaldson said, shaken. We turned and inched our way back along the shelf to safety, and half ran to the sanctuary of the ship. But once we were inside, and I was thinking clearly again, I began to sprout some suspicions. I reasoned it out very carefully. Every time Donaldson had gone out previously, the monster had failed to show. There wasn't another man aboard ship who hadn't had some encounter with the thing, and some of them were remarking about Donaldson's apparent luck. So this time we're out on the shelf, and the monster does show up. But Donaldson's the only one who sees him, after staunchly denying its existence all along. It seemed to me that it might only have been pretense, that he had faked seeing the monster for some reason of his own. I didn't know what that could be, but I had some ideas. Donaldson, after all, had been a member of the first party to explore Pollux 5, the day before the exploration that killed Max. I had remained on the ship while that group had been out. Suppose, I thought, Donaldson had found something on that first trip, something that he hadn't bothered to tell the rest of us about, something he might want badly enough to kill all of us for. It was pretty far-fetched, but it was worth a try. I decided to explore Donaldson's cabin. Ordinarily, we respected privacy to an extreme degree aboard the ship. I had never been in Donaldson's cabin before. He never invited anyone in, and naturally I never went uninvited. But this was a special case, I felt. The door was locked, but it's not hard to coerce and manipulate into opening if you know how they work. Donaldson was in the ship's lab, and I hoped he'd stay out of my way till I had a good look around. The room was just like any of ours, filled with the usual things. A shelf of reference books, a file of music tapes, some minifilms, other things to help to pass away the long hours between planets. It seemed neat, precise, uncluttered, just as Donaldson himself was crisp and reserved. I moved around the room very carefully, looking for anything out of the ordinary. And then I found it. It was a black box, nothing more, about 4 inches square. It was sitting on one of his shelves, just a bare black box, a little cube of metal. But what metal! Beyond the blackness was a strange, unearthly shimmer, an eye-teasing pattern of shifting molecules within the metal itself. The box had a sleek, alien appearance. I knew it hadn't been in the cabin when we left Earth. With a sudden rush of excitement, I realized my mad guess had been right. Donaldson had found something and kept news of it back from the rest of us, and perhaps it was linked to the deaths of Max Feld and Leo Mickens. Cautiously, I reached out to examine the box. I lifted it. It was oddly heavy and strange to the touch. But no sooner did I have it in my hands when the door opened behind me. Donaldson had come back. "What are you doing with that?" he shouted. He crossed the cabin at top speed and seized the box from my hands. And suddenly the monster appeared. It materialized right in the cabin, between Donaldson and me, its vast bulk pressing against the walls. I felt its noisome breath on me, sensed its evil reek. "Donaldson!" But Donaldson was no longer there. I was alone in the cabin with the creature. I backed away into the far corner, my mouth working in terror. I tried to call for help, but couldn't get a word out, and the beast squirmed and changed like a vast amoeba, writhing and twisting from one grey, oily shape to another. I sank to the floor, numb with horror, and then realized that the monster wasn't approaching. It was just staying there, making faces at me. Making faces, like a boogeyman. It was trying to scare me to death. That was how Max Feld had died, and that was how Leo Mickens had died. But I wasn't going to die that way. I rose and confronted the thing. It just remained in the middle of the cabin, blotting everything out behind it, stretching from wall to wall and floor to ceiling, changing from one hell shape to another, and hoping I'd curl up and die. I stepped forward. Cautiously I touched the monster's writhing surface. It was like touching a cloud. I sank right in. The monster changed, took the dragon form again, much smaller, of course, to fit the cabin, Teeth gnashed to the air before my nose, but didn't bite into my throat as I promised to do. Nervelessly, I stood my ground. Then I waded into the heart of the monster, right into its middle with the grey oiliness billowing out all around me. There seemed to be nothing material, nothing to grapple hold of. It was like fighting a dream. But then I hit something solid. My groping hands closed around warm flesh. I started to squeeze. I had a throat, a living core of flesh within the monster. It might be. I constricted my fingers, dug them in, heard strangled gasps coming from further in. I couldn't see, but I hung on. And a human voice said, "Damn you, you're choking me!" And the monster thinned. Through the diminishing smoke of the dream creature, I saw Donaldson, and I was clutching his throat. He still held the black box in his hand, but it was slipping from his grasp. Slipping. He dropped it. It clattered to the floor, and I kicked it far across the cabin. The monster vanished completely. It was just the two of us, there in the cabin. I heard fists pounding on the door from outside, but I ignored them. This was between me and Donaldson. "What is that thing?" I asked, facing him, tugging at his throat. I shook him. "Where'd you find that hell thing?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" he wheezed. My fingers tightened. Suddenly he drew up his foot and lashed out at my stomach. I let go of his throat and fell back. The wind knocked out of me. As I staggered backward, he darted for the fallen box, but I recovered and brought my foot down hard on his outstretched hand. He snarled in pain. I felt his other fist crash into my stomach again. I was almost numb, sick, ready to curl up in a knot and close my eyes. But I forced myself to suck in breath and hit him. His head snapped back. I hit him again, and he reeled soggily. His neat, precise lips swelled into a bloody mass. His fists moved hazily. I blackened one of his eyes, and he groaned and slumped. Fury was in my fists. I was avenging the honor of the exploratory wing against the one man who had broken its oaths. "Enough! Enough!" But I hit him again and again, till he sagged to the floor. I picked up the black metal box, fondled it in my hands. Then tentatively I threw a thought at it. "Monster!" The monster appeared in all its ugliness. "Vanish!" It vanished. "That's how it works, isn't it?" I said. "It's a thought projector. That monster never existed outside your own mind, Donaldson." "Don't hit me again," he whined. I didn't. He was beneath contempt. I threw open the door and saw the other crewmen huddled outside, their faces pale. "It's all over," I said. "Here's your monster." I held out the black box. We held court on Donaldson that night, and he made full confession. That first day he had stumbled over an alien treasure in the cave beyond the hill. That, and the thought converter. The idea came to him that perhaps, as sole survivor of the expedition, he could turn some of the treasure to his own uses. So he utilized the thought converter in a campaign to pick us off one by one without aiming suspicion at himself. Only his clumsy way of pretending to see the creature himself had given him away, else he might have killed us all. Our rule-book gave no guide on what to do about him, but we reached a decision easily enough. When we left Pollux 5, taking with us samples of the treasure and other specimens of the long-dead race, including the thought converter, we left Donaldson behind on the bare, lifeless planet with about a week's supply of food and air. No one ever learned of his treachery. We listed him as a casualty, along with Max and Leo, when we returned to Earth. The exploratory wing had too noble a name to tarnish by revealing what Donaldson had done, and none of us will ever speak the truth. The wing means too much to us for that, and I think they're going to award him a posthumous medal. The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. Dream Town by Henry Slesar, originally published in Fantastic Universe, January 1957. Narrated by Tom Trussel. The woman in the doorway looked like Mum in the homier political cartoons. She was plump, apple-cheeked, white-haired. She wore a fussy old-fashioned nightgown and was busily clutching a worn house-robe around her expansive middle. She blinked at Sol Becker's rain-flattened hair and hang-dog expression and said, "What is it? What do you want?" "I'm sorry." Sol's voice was pained. "The man in the diner said you might put me up. I had my car stolen. A hitchhiker going to Salinas." He was puffing. "Hitchhiker? I don't understand." She clucked at the sight of the pool of water he was creating in her foyer. "Well, come inside, for heaven's sake. You're soaking." "Thanks," Sol said gratefully. With the door firmly shut behind him, the warm interior of the little house covered him like a blanket. He shivered and let the warmth seep over him. "I'm terribly sorry. I know how late it is." He looked at his watch, but the face was too misty to make out the hour. "Must be nearly 3, the woman sniffed. "You couldn't have come at a worse time. I was just on my way to court." The words slid by him. "If I could just stay overnight, until the morning, I could call some friends in San Fernando. I'm very susceptible to head colds," he added inanely. "Well, take those shoes off first," the woman grumbled. "You can undress in the parlor if you'll keep off the rug. You won't mind using the sofa?" "No, of course not. I'd be happy to pay." "Oh, tush, nobody's asking you to pay. This isn't a hotel. You mind if I go back upstairs? They're going to miss me at the palace." "No, of course not," Sol said. He followed her into the darkened parlor and watched as she turned the screw on a hurricane-style lamp, shedding a yellow pool of light over half a flowery sofa and a doily-covered wing chair. "You go on up. I'll be perfectly fine." "Guess you can use a towel, though. I'll get you one, then I'm going up. We wake pretty early in this house. Breakfast at 7. You'll have to be up if you want any." "I really can't thank you enough." "Tush," the woman said. She scurried out and returned a moment later with a thick bath towel. "Sorry I can't give you any bedding, but you'll find it nice and warm in here." She squinted at the dim face of a ship's wheel clock on the mantel and made a noise with her tongue. 3:30, she exclaimed. "I'll miss the whole execution." "The what?" "Good night, young man," Mum said firmly. She padded off, leaving Sol holding the towel. He patted his face, then scrubbed the wet tangle of brown hair. Carefully, he stepped off the carpet and onto the stone floor in front of the fireplace. He removed his drenched coat and suit jacket and squeezed water out over the ashes. He stripped down to his underwear, wondering about next morning's possible embarrassment, and decided to use the damp bath towel as a blanket. The sofa was downy and comfortable. He curled up under the towel, shivered once, and closed his eyes. He was tired and very sleepy, and his customary nightly review was limited to a few detached thoughts about the wedding he was supposed to attend in Salinas that weekend, the hoodlum who had responded to his good nature by dumping him out of his own car, the slogging walk to the village, the little round woman who was hurrying off, like the White Rabbit, to some mysterious appointment on the upper floor. Then he went to sleep. A voice awoke him, shrill and questioning. "Are you naked?" His eyes flew open, and he pulled the towel protectively around his body and glared at the little girl with the rust-red pigtails. "Her, mister," she said, pushing a finger against her freckled nose. "Are you?" "No," he said angrily. "I'm not naked. Will you please go away?" "Sally!" It was Mum, appearing in the doorway of the parlour. "You leave the gentleman alone." She went off again. "Yes," Sol said. "Please let me get dressed, if you don't mind." The girl didn't move. "What time is it?" "Dunno," Sally shrugged. "I like poached eggs. They're my favourite eggs in the whole world." "That's good," Sol said desperately. "Now why don't you be a good girl and eat your poached eggs in the kitchen?" "Ain't ready yet. You going to stay for breakfast?" "I'm not going to do anything until you get out of here." She put the end of a pigtail in her mouth and sat down on the chair opposite. "I went to the palace last night. They had an execution." "Please," Sol groaned. "Be a good girl, Sally. If you let me get dressed, I'll show you how to take your thumb off." "Oh, that's an old trick. Did you ever see an execution?" "No. Did you ever see a little girl with her hide tanned?" "Huh?" "Sally," Mum again, sterner. "You get out of there, or you know what." "Okay," the girl said blithely. "I'm going to the palace again, if I brush my teeth. Aren't you ever going to get up?" She skipped out of the room, and Sol hastily sat up and reached for his trousers. When he had dressed, the clothes still damp and unpleasant against his skin, he went out of the parlour and found the kitchen. Mum was busy at the stove. He said, "Good morning." "Breakfast in 10 minutes," she said cheerfully. "You like poached eggs?" "Sure. Do you have a telephone?" "In the hallway. Party line, so you may have to wait." He tried for 15 minutes to get through, but there was a woman on the line who was terribly upset about a cotton dress she had ordered from Sears and was telling the world about it. Finally, he got his call through to Salinas, and a sleepy-voiced Fred, his old army buddy, listened somewhat indifferently to his tale of woe. "I might miss the wedding," Sol said unhappily. "I'm awfully sorry." Fred didn't seem to be half as sorry as he was. When Sol hung up, he was feeling more despondent than ever. A man, tall and rangy, with a bobbing Adam's apple and a lined face, came into the hallway. "Hello?" he said inquiringly. "You the fella had the car stolen?" "Yes." The man scratched his ear. "Take you over to Sheriff Coogan after breakfast. He'll let the Staties know about it. My name's Dawes." Sol accepted a careful handshake. "Don't get many people coming into town," Dawes said, looking at him curiously. "Ain't seen a stranger in years, but you look like the rest of us," he chuckled. Mum called out, "Breakfast!" At the table, Dawes asked his destination. "Wedding in Salinas," he explained. "Old army friend of mine. I picked this hitchhiker up about 2 miles from here. He seemed okay." "Never can tell," Dawes said placidly, munching egg. "Hey, Ma, that why you were so late coming to court last night?" "That's right, Pa." She poured the blackest coffee Sol had ever seen. "Didn't miss much, though." "What court is that?" Sol asked politely, his mouth full. "Oomagum," Sally said, a piece of toast sticking out from the side of her mouth. "Don't you know nothing?" "Armagon," Dawes corrected. He looked sheepishly at the stranger. "Don't expect Mr. He cocked an eyebrow. "What's the name?" "Becker." "Don't expect Mr. Becker knows anything about Armagon. It's just a dream, you know." He smiled apologetically. "Dream? You mean this Armagon is a place you dream about?" "Yep," Dawes said. He lifted cup to lip. "Great coffee, Ma." He leaned back with a contented sigh. "Dream about it every night. Got so used to the place, I get all confused in the daytime." Mum said, "I get muddle-headed too sometimes." "You mean," Sol put his napkin in his lap. "You mean you dream about the same place?" "Sure," Sally piped. "We all go there at night. I'm going to the palace again, too." "If you brush your teeth," Mum said primly. "If I brush my teeth? Boy, you should seen the execution." "Execution," her father said. "Oh, my goodness." Mum got up hastily. "That reminds me. I got to call poor Mrs. Brundage. It's the least I could do." "Good idea," Dawes nodded. "And I'll have to round up some folks and get old Brundage out of there." Sol was staring. He opened his mouth, but couldn't think of the right question to ask. Then he blurted out, "What execution?" "None of your business," the man said coldly. "You eat up, young man, if you want me to get Sheriff Coogan looking for your car." The rest of the meal went silently, except for Sally's insistence upon singing her school song between mouthfuls. When Dawes was through, he pushed back his plate and ordered Sol to get ready. Sol grabbed his topcoat and followed the man out the door. "Have to stop someplace first," Dawes said, "but we'll be picking up the sheriff on the way. Okay with you?" "Fine," Sol said uneasily. The rain had stopped, but the heavy clouds seemed reluctant to leave the skies over the small town. There was a skittish breeze blowing, and Sol Becker tightened the collar of his coat around his neck as he tried to keep up with the fast-stepping Dawes. They crossed the street diagonally and entered a 2-story wooden building. Dawes took the stairs at a brisk pace and pushed open the door on the second floor. A fat man looked up from behind a desk. "Hi, Charlie. Thought I'd see if you wanted to help move Brundage." The man batted his eyes. "Oh, Brundage," he said. "You know, I clean forgot about him." He laughed. "Imagine me forgetting that." "Yeah." Dawes wasn't amused. "And you Prince Regent." "Oh, Willie." "Well, come on, stir that fat carcass. Got to pick up Sheriff Coogan, too. This here gentleman has to see him about something else." The man regarded Sol suspiciously. "Never seen you before, night or day. Stranger?" "Come on," Dawes said. The fat man grunted and hoisted himself out of the swivel chair. He followed lamely behind the two men as they went out into the street again. A woman with an empty market basket nodded casually to them. "Morning, folks. Enjoyed it last night. Thought you made a right nice speech, Mr. Dawes." "Thanks," Dawes answered gruffly, but obviously flattered. "We were just going over to Brundage's to pick up the body. Ma's going to pay a call on Mrs. Brundage around 10 o'clock. You care to visit?" "Why, I think that's very nice," the woman said. "I'll be sure and do that." She smiled at the fat man. "Morning, Prince." Sol's head was spinning. As they left the woman and continued their determined march down the quiet street, he tried to find answers. "Look, Mr. Dawes," he was panting. The pace was fast. "Does she dream about this Armagon too? That woman back there?" "Yep." Charlie chuckled. "He's a stranger, all right." "And you, mister?" Sol turned to the fat man. "You also know about this palace and everything." "I told you," Dawes said testily. "Charlie here's Prince Regent, but don't let the fancy title fool you. He got no more power than any knight of the realm. He's just too darn fat to do much more than sit on a throne and eat grapes. That right, Charlie?" The fat man giggled. "Here's the sheriff," Dawes said. The sheriff, a sleepy-eyed citizen with a long, sad face, was rocking on a porch as they approached his house, trying to puff a half-lit pipe. He lifted one hand wearily when he saw them. "Hi, Cookie," Dawes grinned. "Thought you, me and Charlie would get Brundage's body out of the house. This here's Mr. Becker. He's got another problem. Mr. Becker, meet Cookie Coogan." The sheriff joined the procession, pausing only once to inquire into Sol's predicament. He described the hitchhiker incident, but Coogan listened stoically. He murmured something about the troopers and shuffled alongside the puffing fat man. Sol soon realized that the destination was a barber shop. Dawes cupped his hands over the plate glass and peered inside. Gold letters on the glass advertised, "Haircut, Shave and Massage Parlour." He reported, "Nothing in the shop. Must be upstairs." The fat man rang the bell. It was a while before an answer came. It was a reedy woman in a housecoat, her hair in curlers, her eyes red and swollen. "Now, now," Dawes said gently, "don't you take on like that, Mrs. Brundage. You heard the charges. It had to be this way." "My poor Vincent," she sobbed. "Better let us up," the sheriff said kindly. "No use just letting him lay there, Mrs. Brundage." "He didn't mean no harm," the woman snuffled. "He was just purely ornery, Vincent was. Just plain mean stubborn." "The law's the law," the fat man sighed. Sol couldn't hold himself in. "What law? Who's dead? How did it happen?" Dawes looked at him disgustedly. "Now is it any of your business? I mean, is it?" "I don't know," Sol said miserably. "You better stay out of this," the sheriff warned. "This is a local matter, young man. You better stay in the shop while we go up." They filed past him and their crying Mrs. Brundage. When they were out of sight, Sol pleaded with her. "What happened? How did your husband die? Please, you must tell me. Was it something to do with Armagon? Do you dream about the place too?" She was shocked at the question. "Of course. And your husband, did he have the same dream?" Fresh tears resulted. "Can't you leave me alone?" She turned her back. "I got things to do. You can make yourself comfortable." She indicated the barber chairs and left through the back door. Sol looked after her, and then ambled over to the first chair and slipped into the high seat. His reflection in the mirror, strangely grey in the dim light, made him groan. His clothes were a mess, and he needed a shave. If only Brundage had been alive. He leaped out of the chair as voices sounded behind the door. Dawes was kicking it open with his foot, his arms laden with two rather large feet, still encased in bedroom slippers. Charlie was at the other end of the burden, which appeared to be a middle-aged man in pyjamas. The sheriff followed the trio up with a sad undertaker expression. Behind him came Mrs. Brundage, properly weeping. "We'll take him to the funeral parlour," Dawes said, breathing hard. "Weighs a ton, don't he?" "What killed him?" Sol said. "Heart attack." The fat man chuckled. The tableau was grisly. Sol looked away, towards the comfortingly mundane atmosphere of the barber shop. But even the sight of the thick padded chairs, the shaving mugs on the wall, the neat rows of cutting instruments, seemed grotesque and morbid. "Listen," Sol said, as they went through the doorway. "About my car—" The sheriff turned and regarded him lugubriously. "Your car? Young man, ain't you got no respect?" Sol swallowed hard and fell silent. He went outside with them, the woman slamming the barber-shop door behind him. He waited in front of the building while the men toted away the corpse to some new destination. He took a walk. The town was just coming to life. People were strolling out of their houses, commenting on the weather, chuckling amiably about local affairs. Kids on bicycles were beginning to appear, jangling the little bells and hooting to each other. A woman, hanging wash in the backyard, called out to him, thinking he was somebody else. He found a little park, no more than 20 yards in circumference, centered around a weather-beaten monument of some unrecognizable military figure. 3 old men took their places on the bench that circled the general and leaned on their canes. Sol was a civil engineer, but he made like a reporter. "Pardon me, sir," the old man, leathery-faced, with a fine yellow moustache, looked at him dumbly. "Have you ever heard of Armagon?" "You a stranger?" "Yes." "Thought so." Sol repeated the question. "Of course I did. Been going there ever since I was a kid. Night times, that is." "How? I mean, what kind of place is it?" "Said you're a stranger." "Yes." "Then it ain't your business." That was that. He left the park and wandered into a thriving luncheonette. He tried questioning the man behind the counter, who merely snickered and said, "You staying with the Dawes, ain't you? Better ask Willie then. He knows the place better than anybody." He asked about the execution, and the man stiffened. "Don't think I can talk about that. Fellow broke one of the laws, that's about it. Don't see where you come into it." At 11 o'clock he returned to the Dawes residence and found Mum in the kitchen, surrounded by the warm nostalgic odour of home-baked bread. She told him that her husband had left a message for the stranger, informing him that the state police would be around to get his story. He waited in the house, gloomily turning the pages of the local newspaper, searching for references to Armagon. He found nothing. At 11:30, a brown-faced state trooper came to call, and Sol told his story. He was promised nothing, and told to stay in town until he was contacted again by the authorities. Mum fixed him a light lunch, the greatest feature of which was some hot biscuits she plucked out of the oven. It made him feel almost normal. He wandered around the town some more after lunch, trying to spark conversation with the residents. He learned little. At 5:30 he returned to the Dawes house and was promptly leaped upon by little Sally. "Hi, hi, hi," she said, clutching his right leg and almost toppling him over. "We had a party in school. I had chocolate cake. You going to stay with us?" "Just another night," Sol told her, trying to shake the girl off. "If it's okay with your folks. They haven't found my car yet." "Sally?" Mum was peering out of the screen door. "You let Mr. Becker alone and go wash. Your pa will be home soon." "Oh, pooh," the girl said, her pigtails swinging. "Do you got a girlfriend, mister?" "No." Sol struggled towards the house with a dead weight on his leg. "Would you mind? I can't walk." "Would you be my boyfriend?" "Well, we'll talk about it, if you let go my leg." Inside the house, she said, "We're having pot roast. You stayin'?" "Of course Mr. Becker's stayin'," Mum said. "He's our guest." "That's very kind of you," Sol said. "I really wish you'd let me pay something." "Don't want to hear another word about pay." Mr. Dawes came home an hour later, looking tired. Mum pecked him lightly on the forehead. He glanced at the evening paper and then spoke to Sol. "Here you've been asking questions, Mr. Becker." Sol nodded, embarrassed. "Guess I have. I'm awfully curious about this Armagon place. Never heard of anything like it before." Dawes grunted. "You ain't a reporter?" "Oh, no, I'm an engineer. I was just satisfying my own curiosity." "Uh-huh." Dawes looked reflective. "You wouldn't be thinking about writing us up or anything? I mean, this is a pretty private affair." "Writing it up?" Sol blinked. "I hadn't thought of it, but I have to admit, it's sure interesting." "Yeah," Dawes said narrowly. "I guess it would be." "Supper," Mum called. After the meal, they spent a quiet evening at home. Sally went to bed, screaming her reluctance, at 8:30. Mum, dozing in the big chair near the fireplace, padded upstairs at 9. Then Dawes yawned widely, stood up, and said good night at 10:15. He paused in the doorway before leaving. "I'd think about that," he said. "Writing it up, I mean. A lot of folks would think you were just plumb crazy." Sol laughed feebly. "I guess they would at that." "Good night," Dawes said. "Good night." He read Sally's copy of Treasure Island for about half an hour. Then he undressed, made himself comfortable on the sofa, snuggled under the soft blanket that Mum had provided, and shut his eyes. He reviewed the events of the day before dropping off to sleep. The troublesome Sally, the strange dream world of Armagon, the visit to the barber shop, the removal of Brundage's body, the conversations with the townspeople, Dawes' suspicious attitude. Then sleep came. He was flanked by marble pillars thrusting towards a high domed ceiling. The room stretched long and wide before him, the walls bedecked in stunning purple draperies. He whirled at the sound of footsteps echoing stridently on the stone floor. Someone was running towards him. It was Sally, pigtail streaming out behind her, the small body wearing a flowing white toga. She was shrieking, laughing as she skittered past him, clutching a gleaming gold helmet. He called out to her, but she was too busy outdistancing her pursuer. It was Sheriff Coogan, puffing and huffing, the metal and gold cloth uniform ludicrous on his lanky frame. "Consarned kid," he wheezed. "Give me my hat." Mum was following him, her stout body regal in scarlet robes. "Sally, you give Sir Coogan his helmet, you hear?" "Mrs. Dawes," Sol said. "Why, Mr. Becker, how nice to see you again. Pa, look who's here." Willie Dawes appeared. No, Sol thought. This was King Dawes. Nothing else could explain the magnificence of his attire. "Yes," Dawes said craftily. "So I see. Welcome to Armagon, Mr. Becker." "Armagon?" Sol gaped. "Then this is the place you've been dreaming about?" "Yep," the king said. "And now you're in it, too." "Then I'm only dreaming." Charlie, the fat man, clumsy as ever in his robes of state, said, "So that's the snooper, eh?" "Yep," Dawes chuckled. "Think you'd better round up the knights." Sol said, "The knights?" "Exelution, exelution," Sally shrieked. "Now wait a minute," Charlie shouted. Running feet, clanking of armour. Sol backed up against a pillar. "Now look here, you've gone far enough." "Not quite," said the king. The knights stepped forward. "Wait!" Sol screamed. Familiar faces under shining helmets moved toward him, the tips of sharp-pointed spears gleaming wickedly, and Sol Becker wondered, would he ever awake? The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. The Highest Mountain by Bryce Walton. Originally published in Galaxy Science Fiction, June 1952. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Bruce heard their feet on the gravel outside and got up reluctantly to open the door for them. He'd been reading some of Byron's poems he'd sneaked aboard the ship. After that he had been on the point of dozing off, and now one of those strangely realistic dreams would have to be postponed for a while. Funny, those dreams. There were faces in them of human beings, or of ghosts, and other forms that weren't human at all, but seemed real and alive, except that they were also just parts of a last unconscious desire to escape death. Maybe that was it. Oh, that my young life were a lasting dream, my spirit not awakening till the beam of an eternity should bring the morrow, Bruce said. He smiled without feeling much of anything and added, "Thanks, Mr. Poe." Jacobs and Anhauser stood outside. The icy wind cut through and into Bruce, but he didn't seem to notice. Anhauser's bulk loomed even larger in the special cold-resisting suiting. Jacobs's thin face frowned slyly at Bruce. "Come on in, boys, and get warm," Bruce invited. "Hey, poet, you're still here," Anhauser said, looking astonished. "We thought you'd be running off somewhere," Jacobs said. Bruce reached for the suit on his hook, started climbing into it. "Where?" he asked. "Mars looks alike wherever you go. Where did you think I'd be running to?" "Any place just so it was away from here and us," Anheuser said. "I don't have to do that. You are going away from me. That takes care of that, doesn't it?" "Oh, come on, get the hell out of there," Jacobs said. He pulled the revolver from its holster and pointed it at Bruce. "We got to get some sleep. We're starting up that mountain at 5 in the morning." "I know," Bruce said. "I'll be glad to see you climb the mountain." Outside, in the weird light of the double moons, Bruce looked up at the gigantic overhang of the mountain. It was unbelievable. The mountain didn't seem to belong here. He thought so when they'd first hit Mars 8 months back and discovered the other 4 rockets that had never got back to Earth, all lying side by side under the mountain's shadow, like little white chalk marks on a tally board. They'd estimated its height at over 45,000 feet, which was a lot higher than any mountain on Earth. Yet Mars was much older, geologically. The entire face of the planet was smoothed into soft, undulating red hills by erosion, and there in the middle of barren nothingness rose that one incredible mountain. On certain nights, when the stars were right, it seemed to Bruce as though it were pointing an accusing finger at Earth, or a warning one. With Jacobs and Anheuser and the remainder of the crew of the ship, Mars 5, 7 judges sat in a semicircle, and Bruce stood there in front of them for the inquest. In the middle of the half-moon of Inquisition, with its long legs stretched out and his hands folded on his belly, sat Captain Terence. His uniform was black. On his arm was the silver fist insignia of the Conqueror Corps. Marcia Reynolds sat on the extreme right, and now there was no emotion at all on her trim, neat face. He remembered her as she had been years ago, but at the moment he wasn't looking very hard to see anything on her face. It was too late. They had gotten her young, and it was too late. Terence's big, square face frowned a little. Bruce was aware suddenly of the sound of the bleak, never-ending wind against the plastiline shelter. He remembered the strange, misty shapes that had come to him in his dreams, the voices that had called to him, and how disappointed he had been when he woke from them. "This is a mere formality," Terence finally said. "Since we all know you killed Lieutenant Doran a few hours ago, Marcia saw you kill him. Whatever you say goes on the record, of course." "For whom?" Bruce asked. "What kind of question is that? For the authorities on Earth when we get back." "When you get back? Like the crews of those other 4 ships out there?" Bruce laughed without much humor. Terence rubbed a palm across his lips, dropped the hand quickly again to his belly. "You want to make a statement or not? You shot Doran in the head with a rifle. No provocation for the attack. You've wasted enough of my time with your damn arguments and antisocial behavior. This is a democratic group. Everyone has his say, but you've said too much and done too much. Freedom doesn't allow you to go around killing fellow crew members." "Any idea that there was any democracy or freedom left died on Venus," Bruce said. "Now we get another lecture," Terence exploded. He leaned forward. "You're sick, Bruce. They did a bad psych job on you. They should never have sent you on this trip. We need strength, all the strength we can find. You don't belong here." "I know," Bruce agreed indifferently. "I was drafted for this trip. I told them I shouldn't be brought along. I said I didn't want any part of it." "Because you're afraid. You're not Conqueror material. That's why you backed down when we all voted to climb the mountain. And what the devil does Venus?" Max Drexel's freckles slipped into the creases across his high forehead. Haven't you heard him expounding on the injustice done to the Venusian Aborigines, Captain? If you haven't, you aren't thoroughly educated to the crackpot idealism still infecting certain people." "I haven't heard it," Terence admitted. "What injustice?" Bruce said, "I guess it couldn't really be considered an injustice any longer. Values have changed too much. Doran and I were part of the crew of that first ship to hit Venus 5 years ago. Remember? One of the new era's more infamous dates. Drexel says the Venusians were Aborigines. No one ever got a chance to find out. We ran into this village. No one knows how old it was. There were intelligent beings there. One community left on the whole planet, maybe a few thousand inhabitants. They made their last mistake when they came out to greet us. Without even an attempt at communication, they were wiped out. The village was burned, and everything alive in it was destroyed." Bruce felt the old weakness coming into his knees, the sweat beginning to run down his face. He took a deep breath and stood there before the cold, nihilistic stares of 14 eyes. "No," Bruce said. "I apologize. None of you know what I'm talking about." Terence nodded. "You're psycho. It's as simple as that. They pick the most capable for these conquests. Even the flights are processes of elimination. Eventually we get the very best, the most resilient, the real conquering blood. You just don't pass, Bruce. Listen, what do you think gives you the right to stand here in judgment against the laws of the whole solar system?" "There are plenty on Earth who agree with me," Bruce said. "I can say what I think now because you can't do more than kill me, and you'll do that regardless." He stopped. This was ridiculous, a waste of his time, and theirs. They had established a kind of final totalitarianism since the new era. The psychologists, the Pavlovian reflex boys, had done that. If you didn't want to be reconditioned to fit into the social machine like a human vacuum tube, you kept your mouth shut. And for many, when the mouth was kept shut long enough, the mind pretty well forgot what it had wanted to open the mouth for in the first place. A minority in both segments of a world split into two factions. Both had been warring diplomatically and sometimes physically for centuries, clung to old ideas of freedom, democracy, self-determinism, individualism. To most, the words had no meaning now. It was a question of which set of conquering heroes should conquer the most space first. So far, only Venus had fallen. They had done a good, thorough job there. 4 ships had come to Mars, and their crews had disappeared. This was the 5th attempt. Terence said, "Why did you shoot Doran?" "I didn't like him enough to take the nonsense he was handing me, and when he shot the—" Bruce hesitated. "What? When he shot what?" Bruce felt an odd tingling in his stomach. The wind's voice seemed to sharpen and rise to a kind of wail. "All right, I'll tell you. I was sleeping, having a dream. Doran woke me up. Marcia was with him. I'd forgotten about that geological job we were supposed to be working on. I've had these dreams ever since we got here." "What kind of dreams?" Someone laughed. "Just fantastic stuff. Ask a Pavlovian there," Bruce said. "People talk to me, and there are other things in the dreams. Voices and some kind of shapes that aren't what you would call human at all." Someone coughed. There was obvious embarrassment in the room. "It's peculiar, but many faces and voices are those of crew members of some of the ships out there, the ones that never got back to Earth." Terence grinned. "Ghosts, Bruce?" "Maybe. This planet may not be a dead ball of clay. I've had a feeling there's something real in the dreams, but I can't figure it out. You're still interested?"
Terence nodded and glanced to either side. "We've seen no indication of any kind of life whatsoever," Bruce pointed out. "Not even an insect, or any kind of plant life, except some fungi and lichen down in the crevices. That never seemed logical to me from the start. We've covered the planet everywhere except one place." "The mountain," Terence said. "You've been afraid even to talk about scaling it." "Not afraid," Bruce objected. "I don't see any need to climb it. Coming to Mars, conquering space, isn't that enough? It happens that the crew of the first ship here decided to climb the mountain, and that set a precedent. Every ship that has come here has had to climb it." "Why?" "Because they had to accept the challenge." "And what's happened to them?" "Like you, they all had the necessary equipment to make a successful climb, but no one's ever come back down. No contact with anything up there." "Captain, I'm not accepting a ridiculous challenge like that. Why should I? I didn't come here to conquer anything, even a mountain. The challenge of coming to Mars, of going on to wherever you guys intend going, before something bigger than you are stops you. It doesn't interest me." "Nothing's bigger than the destiny of Earth," Terence said, sitting up straight and rigid. "I know," Bruce said. "Anyway, I got off the track. As I was saying, I woke up from this dream, and Marcia and Doran were there. Doran was shaking me, but I didn't seem to have gotten entirely awake. Either that, or some part of the dream was real, because I looked out the window. Something was out there, looking at me. It was late, and at first I thought it might be a shadow, but it wasn't. It was misty, almost translucent, but I think it was something alive. I had a feeling it was intelligent, maybe very intelligent. I could feel something in my mind, a kind of beauty and softness and warmth. I kept looking." His throat was getting tight. He had difficulty talking. "Doran asked me what I was looking at, and I told him. He laughed, but he looked. Then I realized that maybe I wasn't still dreaming. Doran saw it too, or thought he did. He kept looking, and finally he jumped and grabbed up his rifle and ran outside. I yelled at him. I kept on yelling and ran after him. 'It's intelligent, whatever it is,' I kept saying. 'How do you know it means any harm?' But I heard Doran's rifle go off before I could get to him. And whatever it was we saw, I didn't see it any more. Neither did Doran. Maybe he killed it. I don't know. He had to kill it. That's the way you think." "What? Explain that remark." "That's the philosophy of conquest. Don't take any chances with aliens. They might hinder our advance across the universe, so we kill everything. Doran acted without thinking at all, conditioned to kill everything that doesn't look like us. So I hit Doran, and I took the gun away from him and killed him. I felt sick, crazy with rage. Maybe that's part of it. All I know is that I thought he deserved to die, and that I had to kill him, so I did." "Is that all, Bruce?" "That's about all, except that I'd like to kill all of you, and I would if I had the chance." "That's what I figured." Terence turned to the psychologist, a small, wiry man who sat there constantly fingering his ear. "Stromberg, what do you think of this gobbledygook? We know he's crazy, but what hit him? You said his record was good up until a year ago." Stromberg's voice was monotonous, like a voice off a tape. "Schizophrenia with mingled delusions of persecution. The schizophrenia is caused by inner conflict, indecision between the older values and our present ones which he hasn't been able to accept. A complete case history would tell why he can't accept our present attitudes. I would say that he has an incipient fear of personal inadequacy, which is why he fears our desire for conquest. He is rationalized built up a defence which he structured with his idealism, foundationed with old-era values, retreat into the past, an escape from his own present feelings of inadequacy. Also, he escapes into these dream fantasies.
Yes, Terence said. But how does that account for Doran's action? Doran must have seen something.
Doran's charts show high suggestibility under stress. Another weak personality eliminated. Let's regard it that way. He imagined he saw something. He glanced at Marcia. Did you see anything? She hesitated, avoiding Bruce's eyes. Nothing at all. There wasn't anything out there to see, except the dust and rocks. That's all there is to see here. We could stay 1,000,000 years and never see anything else. A shadow, maybe.
All right, Terence interrupted. Now, Bruce, you know the law regulating the treatment of serious psycho cases in space.
Yes, execution.
No facilities for handling such cases en route back to Earth.
I understand. No apologies necessary, Captain.
Terence shifted his position. However, we voted to grant you a kind of leniency. In exchange for a little further service from you, you can remain here on Mars after we leave. You'll be left food concentrates to last a long time.
What kind of service?
Stay by the radio and take down what we report as we go up the mountain.
Why not? Bruce said. You aren't certain you're coming back, then?
We might not, Terence admitted calmly. Something's happened to the others. We're going to find out what, and we want it recorded. None of us want to back down and stay here. You can take our reports as they come in.
I'll do that, Bruce said. It should be interesting.
Bruce watched them go, away and up and around the immediate face of the mountain in the bleak cold of the Martian morning.
He watched them disappear behind a high ledge tied together with plastic rope like convicts. He stayed by the radio. He lost track of time and didn't care much if he did. Sometimes he took a heavy sedative and slept. The sedative prevented the dreams. He had an idea that the dreams might be so pleasant that he wouldn't wake up. He wanted to listen to Terence as long as the captain had anything to say. It was nothing but curiosity. At 15,000 feet, Terence reported only that they were climbing. At 20,000 feet, Terence said, "We're still climbing, and that's all I can report, Bruce. It's worth coming to Mars for. To accept a challenge like this." At 25,000 feet, Terence reported, "We've put on oxygen masks. Jacobs and Drexel have developed some kind of altitude sickness, and we're taking a little time out. It's a magnificent sight up here. I can imagine plenty of tourists coming to Mars one of these days just to climb this mountain. Mount Everest is a pimple compared with this. What a feeling of power, Bruce." From 40,000 feet, Terence said, "We gauged this mountain at 45,000. But here we are at 40, and there doesn't seem to be any top. We can see up, and the mountain keeps on going. I don't understand how we could have made such an error in our computations. I talked with Burton. He doesn't see how a mountain this high could still be here when the rest of the planet has been worn so smooth." And then, from 53,000 feet, Terence said with a voice that seemed slightly strained, "No sign of any of the crew of the other 4 ships yet. 10 in each crew. That makes 50. Not a sign of any of them so far. But then we seem to have a long way left to climb." Bruce listened and noted, and took sedatives and opened cans of food concentrates. He smoked and ate and slept. He had plenty of time. He had only time, and the dreams, which he knew he could utilize later to take care of the time. From 60,000 feet, Terence reported, "I had to shoot Anhauser a few minutes ago. He was dissenting. Hear that, Bruce? One of my most dependable men. We took a vote, a mere formality, of course, whether we should continue climbing or not. We knew we'd all vote to keep on climbing. And then Anhauser dissented. He was hysterical. He refused to accept the majority decision. 'I'm going back down,' he yelled, so I had to shoot him. Imagine a man of his apparent caliber turning anti-democratic like that. This mountain will be a great tester for us in the future. We'll test everybody, find out quickly who the weaklings are." Bruce listened to the wind. It seemed to rise higher and higher. Terence, who had climbed still higher, was calling, "Think of it! What a conquest! No man's ever done a thing like this. Like Stromberg says, it's symbolic. We can build spaceships and reach other planets, but that's not actual physical conquest. We feel like gods up here. We can see what we are now. We can see how it's going to be." Once in a while, Terence demanded that Bruce say something to prove he was still there, taking down what Terence said. Bruce obliged. A long time passed, the way time does when no one cares. Bruce stopped taking the sedatives finally. The dreams came back and became, somehow, more real each time. He needed the companionship of the dreams. It was very lonely sitting there without the dreams, with nothing but Terence's voice ranting excitedly on and on. Terence didn't seem real anymore, certainly not as real as the dreams. The problem of where to put the line between dream and reality began to worry Bruce. He would wake up and listen and take down what Terence was saying, and then go to sleep again with increasing expectancy. His dream took on continuity. He could return to the point where he had left it, and it was the same, allowing even for the time difference necessitated by his periods of sleep. He met people in the dreams, 2 girls and a man. They had names: Pietro, Marlene, Helena. Helena he had seen from the beginning, but she became more real to him all the time until he could talk with her. After that, he could also talk with Marlene and Pietro, and the conversations made sense. Consistently, they made sense. The Martian landscape was entirely different in the dreams, green valleys and rivers, or actually wide canals with odd trees trailing their branches on the slow, peaceful, gliding currents. Here and there were pastel-colored cities, and there were things drifting through them that were alive and intelligent and soft and warm and wonderful to know. Dreams, in their vivid colouring of life, as in that fleeting, shadowy, misty strife of semblance with reality which brings to the delirious eye more lovely things of paradise and love, and all our own, than young hope in its sunniest hour hath known. So sometimes he read poetry, but even that was hardly equal to the dreams. And then he would wake up and listen to Terence's voice. He would look out the window over the barren, frigid land where there was nothing but seams of worn land like scabs under the brazen sky. If I had a choice, he thought, I wouldn't ever wake up at all again. The dreams may not be more real, but they're preferable. Dreams were supposed to be wishful thinking primarily, but he couldn't live in them very long. His body would dry up, and he would die. He had to stay awake enough to put a little energy back into himself. Of course, if he died and lost the dreams, there would be one compensation. He would also be free of Terence and the rest of them who had learned that the only value in life lay in killing one's way across the cosmos. But then he had a feeling Terence's voice wouldn't be annoying him much more anyway. The voice was unreal, coming out of some void. He could switch off Terence any time now, but he was still curious. "Bruce? Bruce, you still there? Listen, we're up here at what we figure to be 500,000 feet. It is impossible. We keep climbing, and now we look up, and we can see up and up, and there the mountain is going up and up." And some time later, "Bruce, Marcia's dying. We don't know what's the matter. We can't find any reason for it. She's lying here, and she keeps laughing and calling your name. She's a woman, so that's probably it. Women don't have real guts." Bruce bent toward the radio. Outside the shelter, the wind whistled softly at the door. "Marcia," he said. "Bruce." She hadn't said his name that way for a long time. "Marcia, remember how we used to talk about human values? I remember how you seemed to have something maybe different from the others. I never thought you'd really buy this will to conquer, and now it doesn't matter." He listened to her voice, first the crazy laughter, and then a whisper. "Bruce, hello down there." Her voice was all mixed up with fear and hysteria and mockery. "Bruce, darling, are you lonely down there? I wish I were with you, safe, free, warm. I love you. Do you hear that? I really love you after all, after all." Her voice drifted away, came back to him. "We're climbing the highest mountain. What are you doing there, relaxing where it's peaceful and warm and sane? You always were such a calm guy. I remember now. What are you doing? Reading poetry while we climb the mountain? What was that, Bruce? That one about the mountain you tried to quote to me last night before you... I can't remember it now. Darling, what?" He stared at the radio. He hesitated, reached out and switched on the mic. He got through to her. "Hello, hello, darling," he whispered. "Marcia, can you hear me?" "Yes, yes, you down there, all warm and cozy, reading poetry, darling, where you can see both ways instead of just up and down, up and down." He tried to imagine where she was now as he spoke to her, how she looked. He thought of Earth and how it had been there years ago, with Marcia. Things had seemed so different then. There was something of that hope in his voice now as he spoke to her, yet not directly to her, as he looked out the window at the naked frigid sky and the barren rocks. "And there is nowhere to go from the top of a mountain, but down, my dear, and the springs that flow on the floor of the valley will never seem fresh or clear, for thinking of the glitter of the mountain water in the feathery green of the year." The wind stormed over the shelter in a burst of power, buried the sound of his own voice. "Marcia, are you still there?" "What the devil's the idea, poetry at a time like this, or any time?" Terence demanded. "Listen, you taking this down? We haven't run into any signs of the others. 600,000 feet, Bruce. We feel our destiny. We conquer the solar system, and we'll go out, and we'll climb the highest mountain anywhere. We're going up and up. We voted on it. Unanimous. We go on to the top, Bruce. Nothing can stop us. If it takes 10 years, 100, 1,000 years, we'll find it. We'll find the top. Not the top of this world, the top of everything, the top of the universe." Later, Terence's voice broke off in the middle of something or other. Bruce couldn't make any sense out of it at all, and turned into crazy yells that faded out and never came back. Bruce figured the others might still be climbing somewhere, or maybe they were dead. Either way, it wouldn't make any difference to him. He knew they would never come back down. He was switching off the radio for good when he saw the coloration break over the window. It was the same as the dream, but for an instant dream and reality seemed fused like two superimposed film negatives. He went to the window and looked out. The comfortable little city was out there, and the canal flowing past through a pleasantly cool yet sunny afternoon. Purple mist blanketed the knees of low hills, and there was a valley, green and rich with the trees high and full beside the softly flowing canal water. The filmy shapes that seemed alive, that were partly translucent, drifted along the water's edge, and birds as delicate as coloured glass wavered down the wind. He opened the shelter door and went out. The shelter looked the same, but useless now. How did the shelter of that bleak world get into this one, where the air was warm and fragrant, where there was no cold, from that world into this one of his dreams? The girl, Helena, was standing there, leaning against a tree, smoking a cigarette. He walked toward her and stopped. In the dream it had been easy, but now he was embarrassed in spite of the intimacy that had grown between them. She wore the same casual slacks and sandals. Her hair was brown. She was not particularly beautiful, but she was comfortable to look at because she seemed so peaceful, content, happy with what was, and only what was. He turned quickly. The shelter was still there, and behind it the row of spaceships, not like chalk marks on a tally board now, but like odd relics that didn't belong there in the thick green grass. 5 ships instead of 4. There was his own individual shelter beyond the headquarters building, and the other buildings. He looked up. There was no mountain. For one shivery moment he knew fear, and then the fear went away, and he was ashamed of what he had felt. What he had feared was gone now, and he knew it was gone for good, and he would never have to fear it again. "Look here, Bruce. I wondered how long it would take to get it through that thick poetic head of yours." Get what? He began to suspect what it was all about now, but he wasn't quite sure yet. "Smoke?" she said. He took one of the cigarettes, and she lighted it for him, and put the lighter back into her pocket. "It's real nice here," she said, "isn't it?" "I guess it's about perfect." "It'll be easy. Staying here, I mean. We won't be going to Earth ever again, you know." "I didn't know that, but I didn't think we ever would again." "We wouldn't want to anyway, would we, Bruce?" "No." He kept on looking at the place where the mountain had been. Or maybe it still was. He couldn't make up his mind yet. Which was and which was not? That barren, icy world without life, or this? "Is all that we see or seem," he whispered half to himself, "but a dream within a dream?" She laughed softly. "Poe was ahead of his time," she said. "You still don't get it, do you? You don't know what's been happening." "Maybe I don't." She shrugged and looked in the direction of the ships. "Poor guys. I can't feel much hatred toward them now. The Martians give you a lot of understanding of the human mind, after they've accepted you, and after you've lived with them a while. But the mountain climbers, we can see now. It's just luck, chance. We weren't like them. A deviant is a child of chance." "Yes," Bruce said. "There's a lot of people like us on Earth, but they'll never get the chance we seem to have here, to live decently." "You're beginning to see now which was the dream," she said and smiled. "But don't be pessimistic. Those people on Earth will get their chance too one of these fine days. The conquerors aren't getting far. Venus, and then Mars. And Mars is where they stop. They'll keep coming here and climbing the mountain, and finally there won't be any more. It won't take so long." She rose to her toes and waved and yelled. Bruce saw Pietro and Marlene walking hand in hand up the other side of the canal. They waved back and called, and then pushed off into the water in a small boat and drifted away and out of sight around a gentle turn. She took his arm, and they walked along the canal toward where the mountain had been, or still was. He didn't know. A quarter of a mile beyond the canal, he saw the high mound of red, naked hill, corroded and ugly, rising up like a scar of the surrounding green. She wasn't smiling now. There were shadows on her face as the pressure on his arm stopped him. "I was on the first ship, and Marlene on the second. None like us on the third, and on the fourth ship was Pietro. All the others had to climb the mountain." She stopped talking for a moment, and then he felt the pressure of her fingers on his arm. "I'm very glad you came on the fifth," she whispered. "Are you glad now?" "I'm very glad," he said. "The Martians tested us," she explained. "They're masters of the mind. I guess they've been grinding along through the evolutionary mill a darn long time, longer than we could estimate now. They learned the horror we're capable of from the first ship, the conquerors, the climbers. The Martians knew more like them would come and go on into space, killing, destroying for no other reason than their own sickness. Being masters of the mind, the Martians are also capable of hypnosis. No, that's not really the word. Only the closest our language comes to naming it. Suggestion so deep and strong that it seems real to one human or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000. There's no limit to the number that can be influenced. What the people who came off those ships saw wasn't real. It was partly what the Martians wanted them to see and feel, but most of it, like the desire to climb the mountain, was as much a part of the conqueror's own psychic drive as it was the suggestion of the Martians. She waved her arm slowly to describe a peak. The Martians made the mountain real, so real that it could be seen from space, measured by instruments, even photographed and chipped for rock samples. But you'll see how that was done, Bruce, and realize that this, and not the mountain of the conquerors, is the reality of Mars. This is the Mars no conqueror will ever see." They walked toward the ugly red mound that jutted above the green. When they came close enough, he saw the bodies lying there. The remains, actually, of what had once been bodies. He felt too sickened to go on walking. "It may seem cruel now," she said, "but the Martians realized that there is no cure for the will to conquer. There is no safety from it, either, as the people of Earth and Venus discovered, unless it is given an impossible obstacle to overcome. So the Martians provided the conquerors with a mountain. They themselves wanted to climb. They had to." He was hardly listening as he walked away from Helena toward the eroded hills. The crew members of the first 4 ships were skeletons, tied together with imperishably strong rope about their waists. Far beyond them were those from Mars 5, too freshly dead to have decayed much. Anhauser with his rope cut, a bullet in his head. Jacobs and Marcia and the others. Terence much past them all. He had managed to climb higher than anyone else, and he lay with his arms stretched out, his fingers still clutching at rock outcroppings. The trail they left wound over the ground, chipped in places for holes, red elsewhere with blood from torn hands. Terence was more than 12 miles from the ship, horizontally. Bruce lifted Marcia and carried her back over the rocky dust into the fresh fragrance of the high grass and across it to the shade and peace beside the canal. He put her down. She looked peaceful enough, more peaceful than that other time, years ago, when the two of them seemed to have shared so much, when the future had not yet destroyed her. He saw the shadow of Helena bend across Marcia's face against the background of the silently flowing water of the cool green canal. "You loved her?" "Once," Bruce said. "She might have been sane. They got her when she was young, too young to fight. But she would have, I think, if she'd been older when they got her." He sat looking down at Marcia's face, and then at the water with the leaves floating down it. "And the springs that flow on the floor of the valley will never seem fresh or clear for thinking of the glitter of the mountain water in the feathery green of the year." He stood up, walked back with Helena along the canal toward the calm city. He didn't look back. "They've all been dead quite a while," Bruce said wonderingly. "Yet I seem to be hearing from Terence until only a short time ago. Are the climbers still climbing? Somewhere, Helena?" "Who knows?" Helena answered softly. "Maybe. I doubt if even the Martians have the answer to that." They entered the city.
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. Wall of Crystal, Eye of Night by Algis Budrys. Originally published in Galaxy magazine, December 1961. Narrated by Tom Trussel. 1. Soft as the voice of a morning dove, the telephone sounded at Rufus Solinar's desk. Solinar himself was standing 50 paces away, his leonine head cocked, his hands flat in his hip pockets, watching the nighted world through the crystal wall that faced out over Manhattan Island. The window was so high that some of what he saw was dimmed by low clouds hovering over the rivers. Above him were stars. Below him the city was traced out in light and brimming with light. A falling star, an interplanetary rocket, streaked down toward Long Island facility like a scratch across the soot on the doors of hell. Solinar's eyes took it in, but he was watching the total scene, not any particular part of it. His eyes were shining. When he heard the telephone, he raised his left hand to his lips. "Yes?" The hand glittered with utiligem rings. The effect was that of an attempt at the sort of copper binding that was once used to reinforce the ribbing of wooden warships. His personal receptionist's voice moved from the air near his desk to the air near his ear. Seated at the monitor board in her office, wherever in this building her office was, the receptionist told him, "Mr. Ermin says he has an appointment." "No." Solinar dropped his hand and returned to his panorama. When he had been 20 years younger, managing the modest optical factory that had provided the support of 3 generations of Solinars, he had very much wanted to be able to stand in a place like this and feel as he imagined men felt in such circumstances. But he felt unimaginable now. To be here was one thing. To have almost lost the right and regained it at the last moment was another. Now he knew that not only could he be here today, but that tomorrow, and tomorrow, he could still be here. He had won. His gamble had given him Empervid, and Empervid would give him all. The city was not merely a prize set down before his eyes. It was a dynamic system he had proved he could manipulate. He and the city were one. It buoyed and sustained him. It supported him here in the air, with stars above and light-thickened mist below. The telephone mourned. "Mr. Ermine states he has a firm appointment." "I've never heard of him." And the left hand's utiligems fell from Solinar's lips again. He enjoyed such toys. He raised his right hand, sheathed in insubstantial midnight blue silk, in which the silver threads of metallic wiring ran subtly toward the fingertips. He raised the hand and touched two fingers together. Music began to play behind and before him. He made contact between another combination of finger circuits, and a soft feminine laugh came from the terrace at the other side of the room, where connecting doors had opened. He moved toward it. One layer of translucent drapery remained across the doorway, billowing lightly in the breeze from the terrace. Through it, he saw the taboret with its candle lit, the iced wine in the stand beside it, the two fragile chairs, Bess Algis, slender and regal, waiting in one of them. All these, through the misty curtain, like either the beginning or the end of a dream. "Mr. Ermine reminds you the appointment was made for him at the annual business dinner of the International Association of Broadcasters in 1998. Solinar completed his latest step, then stopped. He frowned down at his left hand. "Is Mr. Ermine with the IAB's Special Public Relations Office?" "Yes," the voice said after a pause. The fingers of Solinar's right hand shrank into a cone. The connecting door closed. The girl disappeared. The music stopped. "All right. You can tell Mr. Ermine to come up." Solinar went to sit behind his desk. The office door chimed. Solinar crooked a finger of his left hand, and the door opened. With another gesture, he kindled the overhead lights near the door and sat in shadow as Mr. Ermine came in. Ermine was dressed in rust-coloured garments. His figure was spare, and his hands were empty. His face was round and soft, with long dark sideburns. His scalp was bald. He stood just inside Solinar's office and said, "I would like some light to see you by, Mr. Solinar." Solinar crooked his little finger. The overhead lights came to soft light all over the office. The crystal wall became a mirror, with only the strongest city lights glimmering through it. "I only wanted to see you first," said Solinar. "I thought perhaps we'd met before." "No," Ermine said, walking across the office. "It's not likely you have ever seen me." He took a card case out of his pocket and showed Solinar proper identification. "I'm not a very forward person." "Please sit down," Solinar said. "What may I do for you?" "At the moment, Mr. Solinar, I'm doing something for you." Solinar sat back in his chair. "Are you? Are you now?" He frowned at Ermine. "When I became a party to the bylaws passed at the 98 dinner, I thought a special public relations office would make a valuable asset to the organization. Consequently, I voted for it, and for the powers it was given. But I never expected to have any personal dealings with it. I barely remembered you people had carte blanche with any IAB member." "Well, of course, it's been a while since 98, Ermine said. "I imagine some legends have grown up around us. Industry gossip, that sort of thing." "Yes." "But we don't restrict ourselves to an enforcement function, Mr. Solinar. You haven't broken any bylaws, to our knowledge." or mine. But nobody feels 100% secure, not under these circumstances. Nor did Solinar yet relax his face into its magnificent smile. I'm sure you found that out. I have a somewhat less ambitious older brother who's with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When I embarked on my own career, he told me I could expect everyone in the world to react like a criminal. Yes, Ermin said, paying no attention to Solinar's involuntary blink. It's one of the complicating factors in a profession like my brother's, or mine. But I am here to advise you, Mr. Solinar. Only that. In what matter, Mr. Ermin? Well, your corporation recently came into control of the patents for a new video system. I understand that this, in effect, makes your corporation the licensor for an extremely valuable sales and entertainment medium. Fantastically valuable. Empavid, Solinar agreed. Various subliminal stimuli are broadcast with and keyed to the overt subject matter. The home receiving unit contains feedback sensors which determine the viewer's reaction to these stimuli and intensify some while playing down others in order to create complete emotional rapport between the viewer and the subject matter. Empavid, in other words, is a system for orchestrating the viewer's emotions. The home unit is self-contained, semi-portable, and not significantly bulkier than the standard TV receiver. Empavid is compatible with standard TV receivers, except, of course, that the subject matter seems thin and vaguely unsatisfactory on a standard receiver. So the consumer shortly purchases an EV unit. It pleased Solinar to spell out the nature of his prize. At a very reasonable price. Quite so, Mr. Solinar. But you had several difficulties in finding potential licensees for this system among the networks. Solinar's lips pinched out. Mr. Ermin raised one finger. First, there was the matter of acquiring the patents from the original inventor, who was also approached by Courtright Burr. Yes, he was, Solinar said in a completely new voice. Competition between Mr. Burr and yourself is long-standing and intense. Quite intense, Solinar said, looking directly ahead of him at the one blank wall of the office. Burr's offices were several blocks downtown, in that direction. Well, I have no wish to enlarge on that point, Mr. Burr being an IAB member in standing as good as yours, Mr. Solinar. There was, in any case, a further difficulty in licensing EV due to the very heavy cost involved in equipping broadcasting stations and network relay equipment for this sort of transmission. Yes, there was. Ultimately, however, you succeeded. You pointed out, quite rightly, that if just one station made the change, and if just a few EV receivers were put into public places within the area served by that station, normal TV outlets could not possibly compete for advertising revenue. Yes. And so your last difficulties were resolved a few days ago, when your Empavid Unlimited, when Empavid, a subsidiary of the Solinar Corporation, became a major stockholder in the Trans-World TV network. I don't understand, Mr. Ermin, Solinar said. Why are you recounting this? Are you trying to demonstrate the power of your knowledge? All these transactions are already matters of record in the IAB confidential files, in accordance with the bylaws. Ermin held up another finger. You're forgetting. I'm only here to advise you. I have two things to say. They are: these transactions are on file with the IAB because they involve a great number of IAB members and an increasingly large amount of capital. Also, Transworld's exclusivity under the IAB bylaws will hold good only until 33% market saturation has been reached. If EV is as good as it looks, that will be quite soon. After that, under the bylaws, Transworld will be restrained from making effective defenses against patent infringement by competitors. then all of the IAB's membership and much of their capital will be involved with EV. Much of that capital is already in anticipatory motion. So a highly complex structure now ultimately depends on the integrity of the Solinar Corporation. If Solinar stock falls in value, not just you, but many IAB members will be greatly embarrassed, which is another way of saying EV must succeed. I know all that. What of it? There's no risk. I've had every related patent on Earth checked. There will be no catastrophic obsolescence of the EV system. Ermin said, There are engineers on Mars. Martian engineers. They're a dying race, but no one knows what they can still do. Solinar raised his massive head. Ermin said, Late this evening, my office learned that Courtright Burr has been in close consultation with the Martians for several weeks. They have made some sort of machine for him. He was on the flight that landed at the facility a few moments ago. Solinar's fists clenched. The lights crashed off and on, and the room wailed. From the terrace came a startled cry and a sound of smashed glass. Mr. Ermin nodded, excused himself, and left. A few moments later, Mr. Ermin stepped out at the pedestrian level of the Solinar building. He strolled through the landscaped garden and across the frothing brook toward the central walkway down the avenue. He paused at a hedge to pluck a blossom and inhale its odor. He walked away, holding it in his naked fingers. 2. Drifting slowly on the thread of his spinneret, Rufus Solinar came gliding down the wind above Courtright Burr's building. The building, like a spider, touched the ground at only the points of its legs. It held its wide, low bulk spread like a parasol over several downtown blocks. Solinar, manipulating the helium-filled plastic drifter far above him, steered himself with jets of compressed gas from plastic bottles in the drifter's structure. Only Solinar himself, in all this system, was not effectively transparent to the municipal antiplane radar, and he himself was wrapped in long, fluttering streamers of dull black metallic sheeting. To the eye, he was amorphous and non-reflective. To electronic sensors, he was a drift of static, much like a sheet of foil picked by the wind from some careless trash heap. To all of the senses of all interested parties, he was hardly there at all, and, thus, in an excellent position for murder. He fluttered against Burr's window. There was the man, crouched over his desk. What was that in his hands? A pomander? Solinar clipped his harness to the edges of the cornice, swayed out against it, his sponge-soled boots pressed to the glass. He touched his left hand to the window and described a circle. He pushed. There was a thud on the carpeting in Burr's office, and now there was no barrier to Solinar. Doubling his knees against his chest, he catapulted forward, the riot pistol in his right hand. He stumbled and fell to his knees, but the gun was up. Burr jolted up behind his desk. The little sphere of orange-gold metal, streaked with darker bronze, its surface vermicular with incrustations, was still in his hands. "Him!" Burr cried out as Solinar fired. Gasping, Solinar watched the charge strike Burr. It threw his torso backward faster than his limbs and head could follow without dangling. The choked-down pistol was nearly silent. Burr crashed backward to end, transfixed, against the wall. Pale and sick, Solinar moved to take the golden ball. He wondered where Shakespeare could have seen an example such as this, to know an old man could have so much blood in him. Burr held the prize out to him. Staring with eyes distended by hydrostatic pressure, his clothing raddled, and his torso grinding its broken bones. Burr stalked away from the wall and moved as if to embrace Solinar. It was queer, but he was not dead. Shuddering, Solinar fired again. Again Burr was thrown back. The ball spun from his splayed fingers as he once more marked the wall with his body. Pomander, orange, whatever. It looked valuable. Solinar ran after the rolling ball, and Burr moved to intercept him, nearly faceless, hunched under a great invisible weight that slowly yielded as his back groaned. Solinar took a single backward step. Burr took a step toward him. The golden ball lay in a far corner. Solinar raised the pistol despairingly and fired again. Burr tripped backward on tiptoe, his arms like windmills, and fell atop the prize. Tears ran down Solinar's cheeks. He pushed one foot forward, and Burr, in his corner, lifted his head and began to gather his body for the effort of rising. Solinar retreated to the window, the pistol sledging backward against his wrist and elbow as he fired the remaining shots in the magazine. Panting, he climbed up into the window frame and clipped the harness to his body, craning to look over his shoulder, as Burr, shredded, leaking blood and worse than blood, advanced across the office. He cast off his holds on the window frame and clumsily worked the drifter controls. Far above him, volatile ballast spilled out and dispersed in the air long before it touched ground. Solinar rose, sobbing, and Burr stood in the window, his shattered hands on the edges of the cut circle, raising his distended eyes steadily to watch Solinar in flight across the enigmatic sky. Where he landed, on the roof of a building in his possession, Solinar had a disposal unit for his gun and his other trappings. He deferred for a time the question of why Burr had failed at once to die. Empty-handed, he returned uptown. He entered his office, called and told his attorneys the exact times of departure and return, and knew the question of dealing with municipal authorities were thereby resolved. That was simple enough, with no witnesses to complicate the matter. He began to wish he hadn't been so irresolute as to leave Burr without the thing he was after. Surely, if the pistol hadn't killed the man, an old man with thin limbs and spotted skin, he could have wrestled that thin-limbed, bloody old man aside, that spotted old man, and dragged himself and his prize back to the window, for all that the old man would have clung to him and clutched at his legs and fumbled for a handhold on his sombre disguise of wrappings, that broken, immortal old man. Solinar raised his hand. The great window of the city grew opaque. Bess Algis knocked softly on the door from the terrace. He would have thought she'd returned to her own apartments many hours ago. Tortuously pleased, he opened the door and smiled at her, feeling the dried tears crack on the skin of his cheeks. He took her proffered hands. "You waited for me," he sighed. "A long time for anyone as beautiful as you to wait." She smiled back at him. "Let's go out and look at the stars." "Isn't it chilly?" "I made spiced hot cider for us. We can sip it and think." He let her draw him out onto the terrace. He leaned on the parapet, his arm around her pulsing waist, his cape drawn around both their shoulders. "Bess, I won't ask if you'd stay with me no matter what the circumstances, but it might be a time will come when I couldn't bear to live in this city. What about that?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. And Courtright Burr put his hand up over the edge of the parapet between them. Solinar stared down at the straining knuckles, holding the entire weight of the man dangling against the sheer face of the building. There was a sliding, rustling noise. and the other hand came up, searched blindly for a hold, and found it, hooked over the stone. The fingers tensed and rose, their tips flattening at the pressure as Burr tried to pull his head and shoulders up to the level of the parapet. Bess breathed. "Oh, look at them! He must have torn them terribly climbing up." Then she pulled away from Solinar and stood staring at him, her hand to her mouth. "But he couldn't have climbed. We're so high." Solinar beat at the hands with the heels of his palms, using the direct, trained blows he had learned at his athletic club. Bone splintered against the stone. When the knuckles were broken, the hands instantaneously disappeared, leaving only streaks behind them. Solinar looked over the parapet. A bundle shrank from sight, silhouetted against the lights of the pedestrian level and the avenue. It contracted to a pinpoint. Then, when it reached the brook and water flew in all directions, it disappeared in a final sunburst, endowed with glory by the many lights which found momentary reflection down there. "Bess, leave me! Leave me, please!" Rufus Solinar cried out. 3. Rufus Solinar paced his office, his hands held safely still in front of him, their fingers spread and rigid. The telephone sounded, and his secretary said to him, "Mr. Solinar, you are 10 minutes from being late at the TTV Executives' Ball. This is a first-class obligation." Solinar laughed. "I thought it was when I originally classified it." "Are you now planning to renege, Mr. Solinar?" the secretary inquired politely. Certainly, Solinar thought. He could as easily renege on the ball as a king could on his coronation. "Burr, you scum! What have you done to me?" he asked the air, and the telephone said, "Beg pardon?" "Tell my valet," Solinar said. "I'm going." He dismissed the phone. His hands cupped in front of his chest, a firm grip on emptiness might be stronger than any prize in a broken hand. Carrying in his chest something he refused to admit was terror, Solinar made ready for the ball. But only a few moments after the first dance set had ended, Malcolm Levier of the local TTV station executive staff looked over Solinar's shoulder and remarked, "Oh, there's Court Burr, dressed like a gallows bird." Solinar, glittering in the costume of the Medici, did not turn his head. "Is he? What would he want here?" Levier's eyebrows arched. "He holds a little stock. He has entrée, but he is late." Levier's lips quirked. "It must have taken him some time to get that make-up on." "Not in good taste, is it? Look for yourself." "Oh, I'll do better than that," Solinar said. "I'll go and talk to him a while. Excuse me, Levier." And only then did he turn around, already started on his first pace toward the man. But Courtright Burr was only a pasteboard imitation of himself as Solinar had come to know him. He stood to one side of the doorway, dressed in black and crimson robes, with black leather gauntlets on its hand, carrying a staff of weathered natural wood. His face was shadowed by a sackcloth hood, the eyes well hidden. His face was powdered grey, and some blend of livid colours hollowed his cheeks. He stood motionless as Solinar came up to him. As he had crossed the floor, each step regular, the eyes of bystanders had followed Solinar until, anticipating his course, they found Burr waiting. The noise level of the ball shrank perceptibly, for the lesser revellers who chanced to be present were sustaining it all alone. The people who really mattered here were silent and watchful. The thought was that Burr, defeated in business, had come here in some insane reproach to his adversary, in this lugubrious, distasteful clothing. Why, he looked like a corpse, or worse. The question was, what would Solinar say to him? The wish was that Burr would take himself away, back to his estates or to some other city. New York was no longer for Courtright Burr. But what would Solinar say to him now, to drive him back to where he hadn't the grace to go willingly? "Courtright," Solinar said in a voice confined to the two of them. "So your Martian immortality works?" Burr said nothing. "You got that in addition, didn't you? You knew how I'd react. You knew you'd need protection. Paid the Martians to make you physically invulnerable. It's a good system. Very impressive. Who would have thought the Martians knew so much? But who here is going to pay attention to you now? Get out of town, Courtright. You passed your chance. You're dead as far as these people are concerned. All you have left is your skin." Burr reached up and surreptitiously lifted a corner of his fleshed mask, and there he was, under it. The hood retreated an inch, and the light reached his eyes. And Solinar had been wrong. Burr had less left than he thought. "Oh, no, no, Courtright," Solinar said softly. "No, you're right. I can't stand up to that." He turned and bowed to the assembled company. "Good night," he cried, and walked out of the ballroom. Someone followed him down the corridor to the elevators. Solinar did not look behind him. "I have another appointment with you now," Ermin said at his elbow. They reached the pedestrian level. Solinar said, "There's a cafe. We can talk there." "Too public, Mr. Solinar. Let's simply stroll and converse." Ermin lightly took his arm and guided him along the walkway. Solinar noticed then that Ermin was costumed so cunningly that no one could have guessed the appearance of the man. "Very well," Solinar said. "Of course." They walked together, casually. Ermin said, "Burr's driving you to your death. Is it because you tried to kill him earlier? Did you get his Martian secret?" Solinar shook his head. "You didn't get it," Ermin sighed. "That's unfortunate. I'll have to take steps." "Under the bylaws," Solinar said, "I cry laissez-faire." Ermin looked up, his eyes twinkling. "Laissez-faire? Mr. Solinar, do you have any idea how many of our members are involved in your fortunes? They will cry laissez-faire, Mr. Solinar, but clearly you persist in dragging them down with you. No, sir, Mr. Solinar. My office now forwards an immediate recommendation to the Technical Advisory Committee of the IAB that Mr. Burr probably has a system superior to yours, and that stock in Solinar Incorporated has best be disposed of." "There's a bench," Solinar said. "Let's sit down." "As you wish." Ermin moved beside Solinar to the bench, but remained standing. "What is it, Mr. Solinar?" "I want your help. You advised me on what Burr had. It's still in his office building, somewhere. You have resources. We can get it." "Laissez-faire, Mr. Solinar. I visited you in an advisory capacity. I can do no more." "For a partnership in my affairs, could you do more?" "Money?" Ermin tittered. "For me?" "Do you know the conditions of my employment?" If he had thought, Solinar would have remembered. He reached out tentatively. Ermin anticipated him. Ermin bared his left arm and sank his teeth into it. He displayed the arm. There was no quiver of pain in voice or stance. "It's not a legend, Mr. Solinar. It's quite true. We of our office must spend a year after the nerve surgery learning to walk without the feel of our feet, to handle objects without crushing them or letting them slip, or damaging ourselves. Our mundane pleasures are auditory, olfactory, and visual, easily gratified at little expense. Our dreams are totally interior, Mr. Solinar. The operation is irreversible. What would you buy for me with your money?" "What would I buy for myself?" Solinar's head sank down between his shoulders. Ermin bent over him. "Your despair is your own, Mr. Solinar. I have official business with you." He lifted Solinar's chin with a forefinger. "I judge physical interference to be unwarranted at this time, but matters must remain so that the IAB members involved with you can recover the value of their investments in EV. Is that perfectly clear, Mr. Solinar? You are hereby enjoined under the bylaws as enforced by the Special Public Relations Office." He glanced at his watch. "Notice was served at 1:27 a.m. City time." 1:27, Solinar said. "City time." He sprang to his feet and raced down a companionway to the taxi level. Mr. Ermin watched him quizzically. He opened his costume, took out his omnipresent medical kit, and sprayed coagulant over the wound in his forearm. Replacing the kit, he adjusted his clothing and strolled down the same companionway Solinar had run. He raised an arm, and a taxi flitted down beside him. He showed the driver a card, and the cab lifted off with him, its lights glaring in a priority pattern far faster than Solinar's ordinary legal limit allowed. 4. Long Island facility vaulted at the stars in great kangaroo leaps of arch and cantilever span, jewelled in glass and metal as if the entire port were a mechanism for navigating interplanetary space. Rufus Solinar paced its esplanades, measuring his steps, holding his arms still, for the short time until he could board the Mars rocket. Erect and majestic, he took a place in the lounge and carefully sipped liqueur, once the liner had boosted away from Earth and coupled in its Faraday main drives. Mr. Ermin settled into the place beside him. Solinar looked over at him calmly. "I thought so." Ermin nodded. "Of course you did. But I didn't almost miss you. I was here ahead of you. I have no objection to your going to Mars, Mr. Solinar. Laissez-faire, provided I can go along." "Well," Rufus Solinar said. "Liqueur?" He gestured with his glass. Ermin shook his head. "No, thank you," he said delicately. Solinar said, "Even your tongue?" "Of course my tongue, Mr. Solinar. I taste nothing. I touch nothing." Ermin smiled. "But I feel no pressure." "All right, then," Rufus Solinar said crisply. "We have several hours to landing time. You sit and dream your interior dreams, and I'll dream mine." He faced around in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. "Mr. Solinar," Ermin said gently. "Yes?" "I am once again with you by appointment as provided under the bylaws." "State your business, Mr. Ermin." "You are not permitted to lie in an unknown grave, Mr. Solinar. Insurance policies on your life have been taken out at a high premium rate. The IAB members concerned cannot wait the statutory 7 years to have you declared dead. Do what you will, Mr. Solinar, but I must take care I witness your death. From now on, I am with you wherever you go." Solinar smiled. "I don't intend to die. Why should I die, Mr. Ermin?" "I have no idea, Mr. Solinar, but I know Courtright Burr's character, and isn't that he, seated there in the corner? The light is poor, but I think he is recognizable." Across the lounge, Burr raised his head and looked into Solinar's eyes. He raised a hand near his face, perhaps merely to signify greeting. Rufus Solinar faced front. "A worthy opponent, Mr. Solinar," Ermin said. "A persevering, unforgiving, ingenious man. And yet—" Ermin seemed a little touched by bafflement. "And yet it seems to me, Mr. Solinar, that he got you running rather easily. What did happen between you after my advisory call?" Solinar turned a terrible smile on Ermin. "I shot him to pieces. If you'd peel his face, you'd see." Ermin sighed. "Up to this moment, I had thought perhaps you might still salvage your affairs." "Pity, Mr. Ermin? Pity for the insane?" "Interest. I can take no part in your world. Be grateful, Mr. Solinar. I am not the same gullible man I was when I signed my contract with IAB so many years ago." Solinar laughed. Then he stole a glance at Burr's corner. The ship came down at Abernathy Field in Aresia, the terrestrial city. Industrialized, prefabricated, jerry-built and clamorous, the storm-proofed buildings huddled proudly at the desert's edge. Low on the horizon was the Martian settlement, the buildings so skillfully blended with the landscape, so eroded, so much abandoned, that the uninformed eye saw nothing. Solinar had been to Mars on a tour. He had seen the natives in their nameless dwelling place, arrogant, venomous, and weak. He had been told by the paid guide they trafficked with Earthmen as much as they cared to, and kept to their place on the rim of Earth's encroachment, observing. "Tell me, Ermin," Solinar said quietly as they walked across the terminal lobby. "You're to kill me, aren't you, if I try to go on without you?" "A matter of procedure, Mr. Solinar," Ermin said evenly. "We cannot risk the investment capital of so many IAB members." Solinar sighed. "If I were any other member, how I would commend you, Mr. Ermin. Can we hire a car for ourselves, then, somewhere nearby?" "Going out to see the engineers?" Ermin asked. "Who would have thought they'd have something valuable for sale?" "I want to show them something," Solinar said. "What thing, Mr. Solinar?" They turned the corner of a corridor, with branching hallways here and there, not all of them busy. "Come here," Solinar said, nodding toward one of them. They stopped out of sight of the lobby and the main corridor. "Come on," Solinar said, "a little further." "No," Ermin said. "This is farther than I really wish. It's dark here." "Why's too late, Mr. Ermin," Solinar said, his arms flashing out. One palm impacted against Ermin's solar plexus and the other against the muscle at the side of his neck, but not hard enough to kill. Ermin collapsed, starved for oxygen, while Solinar silently cursed having been cured of murder. Then Solinar turned and ran. Behind him, Ermin's body struggled to draw breath by reflex alone. Moving as fast as he dared, Solinar walked back and reached the taxi lock, pulling a respirator from a wall rack as he went. He flagged a car and gave his destination, looking behind him. He had seen nothing of Courtright Burr since setting foot on Mars, but he knew that soon or late Burr would find him. A few moments later, Ermin got to his feet. Solinar's car was well away. Ermin shrugged and went to the local broadcasting station. He commandeered a private desk, a firearm, and immediate time on the IAB inter-office circuit to Earth. When his call acknowledgement had come back to him from his office there, he reported, "Solinar is en route to the Martian city. He wants a duplicate of Burr's device, of course, since he smashed the original when he killed Burr. I'll follow and make final disposition. The disorientation I reported previously is progressing rapidly. Almost all his responses now are inappropriate. On the flight out, he seemed to be staring at something in an empty seat. Quite often, when spoken to, he obviously hears something else entirely. I expect to catch one of the next few flights back. There was no point in waiting for comment to wend its way back from Earth. Ermin left. He went to a cab rank and paid the exorbitant fee for transportation outside Arisian city limits. Close at hand, the Martian city was like a welter of broken pots. Shards of wall and roof joined at savage angles and pointed to nothing. Underfoot, drifts of vitreous material, shaped to fit no sane configuration, and broken to fit such a mosaic as no church could contain, rocked and slid under Solinar's hurrying feet. What from Arisia had been a solid front of dun colour was here a facade of red, green, and blue splashed about centuries ago, and since then weathered only enough to show how bitter the colours once had been. The plum-coloured sky stretched over all this like a frigid membrane, and the wind blew and blew. Here and there, as he progressed, Solinar saw Martian arms and heads protruding from the rubble. Sculptures. He was moving toward the heart of the city, where some few unbroken structures persisted. At the top of a heap of shards, he turned to look behind him. There was the dust plume of his cab, returning to the city. He expected to walk back, perhaps to meet someone on the road, all alone on the Martian plain, if only Ermin would forbear from interfering. Searching the flat, thin-aired landscape, he tried to pick out the plodding dot of Courtright Burr, but not yet. He turned and ran down the untrustworthy slope. He reached the edge of the maintained area. Here the rubble was gone, the ancient walks swept, the statues kept upright on their pediments. But only broken walls suggested the fronts of the houses that had stood here, knifing their sides up through the wind-rippled sand that only constant care kept off the street. The shadow houses fenced his way, and the sculptures were motionless as hope. Ahead of him, he saw the buildings of the engineers. There was no heap to climb, and looked to see if Ermin followed close behind. Sucking his respirator, he reached the building of the Martian engineers. A sounding strip ran down the door jamb. He scratched his fingernails sharply along it, and the magnified vibration, ducted through the hollow walls, rattled his plea for entrance. 5. The door opened, and Martians stood looking. They were spindly-limbed and slight, their faces framed by folds of leathery tissue. Their mouths were lipped with horn as hard as dentures, and pursed, forever ready to masticate. They were pleasant neither to look at, nor, Solinar knew, to deal with. But Courtright Burr had done it, and Solinar needed to do it. "Does anyone here speak English?" he asked. "Aye," said the central Martian, his mouth opening to the sound, closing to end the reply. "I would like to deal with you. Whenever," the Martian said, and the group at the doorway parted deliberately to let Solinar in. Before the door closed behind him, Solinar looked back, but the rubble of the abandoned sectors blocked his line of sight into the desert. "What can you offer, and what do you want?" the Martian asked. Solinar stood half-ringed by them, in a room whose corners he could not see in the uncertain light. "I offer you terrestrial currency." The English-speaking Martian, the Martian who had admitted to speaking English, turned his head slightly and spoke to his fellows. There were clacking sounds as his lips met. The others reacted variously, one of them suddenly gesturing with what seemed a disgusted flip of his arm before he turned without further word and stalked away, his shoulders looking like the shawled back of a very old and very hungry woman. "What did Burr give you?" Solinar asked. "Burr?" The Martian cocked his head. His eyes were not multifaceted, but gave that impression. "He was here, and he dealt with you, not long ago. On what basis?" "Burr. Yes, Burr gave us currency. We will take currency from you. For the same thing we gave him?" "For immortality, yes." This is a new word. "Is it? For the secret of not dying?" "Not dying? You think we have not dying for sale here?" The Martian spoke to the others again. Their lips clattered. Others left, like the first one had, moving with great precision and very slow step, and no remaining tolerance for Solinar. Solinar cried out, "What did you sell him then?" The principal engineer said, "We made an entertainment device for him. A little thing, this size." Solinar cupped his hands. "You have seen it, then?" "Yes. And nothing more? That was all he bought here?" "It was all we had to sell, or give. We don't yet know whether Earthmen will give us things in exchange for currency. We'll see when we next need something from Eresia." Solinar demanded, "How did it work, this thing you sold him?" "Oh, it lets people tell stories to themselves." Solinar looked closely at the Martian. "What kind of stories?" "Any kind," the Martian said blandly. "Burr told us what he wanted. He had drawings with him of an Earthman device that used pictures on a screen and broadcast sounds to carry the details of the story told to the auditor. He stole those patents. He couldn't have used them on Earth." "And why should he? Our device needs to convey no precise details. Any mind can make its own. It only needs to be put into a situation, and from there it can do all the work. If an auditor wishes a story of contact with other sexes, for example, the projector simply makes it seem to him, the next time he is with the object of his desire, that he is getting positive feedback, that he is arousing a similar response in that object. Once that has been established for him, the auditor may then leave the machine, move about normally, conduct his life as usual, but always in accordance with the basic situation. It is, you see, in the end a means of introducing system into his view of reality. Of course, his society must understand that he is not in accord with reality, for some of what he does cannot seem rational from an outside view of him. So some care must be taken, but not much. If many such devices were to enter his society, soon the circumstances would become commonplace, and the society would surely readjust to allow for it," said the English-speaking Martian. "The machine creates any desired situation in the auditor's mind?" "Certainly. There are simple predisposing tape that can be inserted as desired. Love, adventure, cerebration. It makes no difference." Several of the bystanders clacked sounds out to each other. Solinar looked at them narrowly. It was obvious there had to be more than one English speaker among these people. "And the device you gave Burr?" he asked the engineer, neither calmly nor hopefully. "What sort of stories could its auditors tell themselves?" The Martian cocked his head again. It gave him the look of an owl at a bedroom window. "Oh, there was one situation we were particularly instructed to include. Burr said he was thinking ahead to showing it to an acquaintance of his. It was a situation of adventure, an adventure with the fearful. and it was to end in loss and bitterness. The Martian looked even more closely at Solinar. Of course, the device does not specify details. No one but the auditor can know what fearful thing inhabits his story, or precisely how the end of it would come. You would, I believe, be Rufus Solinar. Burr spoke of you and made the noise of laughing. Solinar opened his mouth, but there was nothing to say. You want such a device? The Martian asked. We've prepared several since Burr left. He spoke of machines that would manufacture them in astronomical numbers. We, of course, have done our best with our poor hands. Solinar said, I would like to look out your door. Pleasure. Solinar opened the door slightly. Mr. Erman stood in the cleared street, motionless as the shadow buildings behind him. He raised one hand in a gesture of unfelt greeting as he saw Solinar, then put it back on the stock of his rifle. Solinar closed the door and turned to the Martian. How much currency do you want? Oh, all you have with you. You peoples always have a good deal with you when you travel. Solinar plunged his hands into his pockets and pulled out his billfold, his change, his keys, his jewelled radio, whatever was there. He rummaged out onto the floor, listening to the sounds of rolling coins. I wish I had more here, he laughed. I wish I had the amount that man out there is going to recover when he shoots me. The Martian engineer cocked his head. But your dream is over, Mr. Solinar, he clacked dryly. Isn't it? Quite so. But you to your purposes, and I to mine. Now give me one of those projectors, and set it to predispose a situation I am about to specify to you. Take however long it needs. The audience is a patient one. He laughed, and tears gathered in his eyes. Mr. Erman waited, isolated from the cold, listening to hear whether the rifle stock was slipping out of his fingers. He had no desire to go into the Martian building after Solinar and involve third parties. All he wanted was to put Solinar's body under a dated marker with as little trouble as possible. Now and then he walked a few paces backward and forward to keep from losing muscular control at his extremities because of low skin temperature. Solinar must come out soon enough. He had no food supply with him, and though Erman did not like the risk of engaging a man like Solinar in a starvation contest, there was no doubt that a man with no taste for fuel could outlast one with the acquired reflexes of eating. The door opened, and Solinar came out. He was carrying something, perhaps a weapon. Erman let him come closer while he raised and carefully sighted his rifle. Solinar might have some Martian weapon, or he might not. Erman did not particularly care. If Erman died, he would hardly notice it. Far less than he would notice a botched ending to a job of work already soiled by Solinar's break away at the space field. If Erman died, some other SPRO agent would be assigned almost immediately. No matter what happened, SPRO would stop Solinar before he ever reached Abernathy Field. So there was plenty of time to aim an unhurried, clean shot. Solinar was closer now. He seemed to be in a very agitated frame of mind. He held out whatever he had in his hand. It was another one of the Martian entertainment machines. Solinar seemed to be offering it as a token to Erman. Erman smiled. "What can you offer me, Mr. Solinar?" he said, and shot. The golden ball rolled away over the sand. "There now," Erman said. "Now, wouldn't you sooner be me than you? And where is the thing that made the difference between us?" He shivered. He was chilly. Sand was blowing against his tender face, which had been somewhat abraded during his long wait. He stopped, transfixed. He lifted his head. Then, with a great swing of his arms, he sent the rifle whirling away. "The wind!" he sighed into the thin air. "I feel the wind!" He leapt into the air, and sand flew away from his feet as he landed. He whispered to himself, "I feel the ground!" He stared in tremblant joy at Solinar's empty body. "What have you given me?" Full of his own rebirth, he swung his head up at the sky again, and cried in the direction of the sun, "Oh, you squeezing, nibbling people who made me incorruptible and thought that was the end of me!" With love he buried Solinar, and with reverence he put up the marker. But he had plans for what he might accomplish with the facts of this transaction, and the myriad others he was privy to. A sharp bit of pottery had penetrated the sole of his shoe and gashed his foot, but he, not having seen it, hadn't felt it. Nor would he see it or feel it even when he changed his stockings, for he had not noticed the wound when it was made. It didn't matter. In a few days it would heal, though not as rapidly as if it had been properly attended to. Vaguely, he heard the sound of Martians clacking behind the closed door as he hurried out of the city, full of revenge and reverence for his saviour. The End. Do you want to know how you can help save more of the forgotten stories of futures past? Visit storiesoffuturespast.substack.com/about.